On a quiet morning in Aguascalientes. The shops were open. The streets were starting to get crowded. On a street corner, next to an old trash can, a small box was discovered quietly left behind. Inside, a horrifying secret was hidden: the body of a child. This story would open one of Mexico's most shocking cases. 2. Where the truth was hidden for more than 2 decades. And justice was just barely coming before it was too late. It was a peaceful November morning in Aguascalientes. The city was slowly coming to life. Shops were opening, and people were beginning their routines. However, on a quiet street, next to an old dumpster, something unusual lay waiting. Dylan Randall Mercado Gonzalez was born in Zacatecas, Mexico, on July 20, 1995. His mother, Liliana Lucero Mercado Gonzalez, was from Puebla, Andrés Amador Gerido. Her partner at the time was Dylan's father, but he refused to acknowledge Dylan as his son. Liliana and Andres separated, leaving Liliana to raise Dylan by herself. Later, Francisco Javier López González, also from Puebla, became involved with Liliana. This relationship would significantly change Dylan's life. Francisco had a dark past. His first son, from a previous marriage, died under suspicious circumstances. He supposedly fell down the stairs while in his care. That tragedy destroyed his marriage, but not his freedom. Eventually, Francisco and Liliana married and moved into a new home in Zacatecas. With little Dylan, Francisco made a living photographing weddings and other social events, while Liliana trained as a dietitian, baked cakes, taught low-calorie cooking classes, and handmade hair accessories. They also devoted to Gnosticism, an esoteric doctrine that claimed spiritual salvation could be achieved through knowledge. Francisco saw himself as a philosopher and spiritual guide, an image that masked the darkness within their home. By the end of 1999, they had a daughter, and then Liliana was pregnant with twins. Although they seemed happy to the outside world, Dylan's life was difficult. Starting at age 4, he suffered constant physical and emotional abuse. People remembered him being forced to bathe in freezing water outdoors. Even in winter, he also had to kneel on stones for long periods or carry heavy things until he was exhausted. Neighbors often heard him crying at night. They noticed that Dylan was treated like an outsider in his own family. Liliana and Francisco clearly favored their daughter and were excited about the twins' birth, but they seemed to see Dylan as a problem. Francisco was described as a jealous and controlling man. He restricted Liliana and their daughter's activities, but would leave Dylan outside alone for hours. Dylan's only advocate was his maternal grandmother, who attempted to gain custody to safeguard him. However, before she could, the family abruptly disappeared, moving to Jalisco and concealing their secrets. Unfortunately, this relocation did not improve Dylan's situation. Reports surfaced indicating the abuse persisted and intensified. Tragically, the escalating violence culminated in a fatal incident that horrified Mexico and ignited widespread public condemnation. On the night of the 11th of November, 1999, Liliana and Francisco argued for reasons that were never fully clarified. At some point, Francisco turned his anger toward Dylan, attacking him with such force that the boy did not survive. He died without ever receiving medical help. Determined to hide the crime, Liliana and Francisco wrapped Dylan's body and placed it inside an empty egg carton box, securing it tightly with cords. The following morning, the 12th of November, Francisco went to the bus terminal and took a bus to Aguascalientes, roughly 60 miles away. When he arrived, it took a taxi to the La Estación neighborhood. The taxi driver remembered Francisco being quiet and refusing help with a box he was carrying. In La Estación, Francisco looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then he put the box in a trash container, hoping the garbage collection would get rid of any evidence. However, things didn't go as expected. Before the garbage truck came, a recycler looking for valuable materials in the trash saw the box tied with string. Thinking it might be worth something, he took it out and cut the strings open with a small knife. Inside, hidden under plastic bags and fabric scraps, he found the body of a young child. He was shocked and yelled for help, breaking the silence and attracting people who became the first witnesses to a crime that would soon be famous. The early morning quiet was broken by the recycler's screams. People who were out early and shopkeepers just opening up were drawn to the noise. They went to see what was happening, filled with curiosity and shock. Soon after, the police arrived. The area was quickly cordoned off, with officers keeping back the growing crowd of onlookers. The boy's body was encased in layers, a white tablecloth decorated with Christmas motifs, a floral blanket in brown and yellow tones, and multiple black plastic garbage bags. Forensic specialists documented the scene, photographing every detail and dusting for fingerprints before preparing to remove the remains. Some accounts later suggested that a sharp object with reddish stains was found near the body. Whether it was connected to the crime or simply the knife the recycler had used to cut the bindings on the box could not be determined. The child was curled into a fetal position, wearing only a t-shirt with a purple collar and a print from the animated film, 101 Dalmatians. Visible injuries hinted at the brutality he had endured. The autopsy would reveal far more. Multiple abrasions and bruises of varying ages. Cigarette, burns. A small wound approximately 5 mm on the upper right lip, likely caused by a blow, swelling on the right frontal area of the skull, and catastrophic internal trauma. The cause of death was determined to be severe cranioencephalic trauma, combined with a cervical spinal cord injury and a powerful abdominal blow that ruptured the bladder. Forensic estimates placed the boy's age between 3 and 5 years. He was described as having light brown skin with a slender build, brown hair, and coffee-colored eyes. His forehead was broad, eyebrows moderately thick, nose straight, and lips of medium size. He had been dead for at least 16 hours before discovery. The area had no clues, like papers or toys, to help figure out who the child was or who his parents were. The media publicized the case, and the community was deeply moved. Public grief intensified when officials announced that the boy would be buried anonymously in a mass grave if his name remained unknown. A woman, Margarita Alonso Castillo, then approached the state attorney with a unique request. She wanted to symbolically adopt the boy to ensure he received a proper burial instead of being buried as an unidentified person. Investigators were initially suspicious of her, thinking she might be involved in the crime. However, after questioning her, they determined she was just a compassionate citizen with no connection to the events. Once her motives were confirmed, the attorney's office and the civil registry approved her request. The boy was renamed Leonardo Misael Barranco Alonso. This allowed them to issue an official death certificate and provide him with a proper burial, instead of leaving him in an unmarked mass grave. The investigation continued, but progress was slow. To identify the child, authorities created a composite sketch and released a post-mortem photograph to the media, hoping someone would recognize him. Soon, 2 witness statements offered a potential breakthrough. A man reported seeing someone carrying an egg carton-like box walk from a taxi to the dumpster where the child was found. The taxi driver confirmed he drove a passenger from the bus station to that location. He said the box seemed heavy, and the passenger acted secretive, refusing help carrying it. Both witnesses described the man as being between 30 and 35 years old. Police created 2 versions of a composite sketch of the suspect, one with a hood and one without, and distributed them widely to generate leads. For nearly 2 years, the case remained unsolved. Then, in 2001, an unexpected turn came when the story was featured on the television program Mujer, Casos de la Vida Real, hosted by actress and presenter Sylvia Pinal. The broadcast brought the haunting image of the unnamed boy and the mystery of his death back into the national spotlight. The episode, titled "The Boy in the Dumpster," aired for roughly 30 minutes. It was dramatized by well-known actors recreating the events leading to the discovery of the unidentified child. During the broadcast, host Sylvia Pinal made a public appeal, urging viewers to share any information that could help reveal the boy's identity or lead to those responsible for his death. The effect was immediate. The already disturbing case was now known to millions of homes throughout Mexico, causing a strong and emotional public response. A national awareness campaign was launched. The resulting tips and testimonies helped investigators get closer to solving the case. Dionisio Perez Tamotzli was one of the first people to come forward. He asked to examine the composite sketch and photo of the child carefully, believing he might know him. When shown the images, his expression changed, and he identified the child as Dylan Randall Mercado. Dionisio explained that he used to be business partners with Francisco, Dylan's stepfather. They had met through their shared interest in Gnosticism, and Dionisio's last sighting of Francisco and Liliana was in Jalisco. He also revealed that he had once witnessed Dylan being mistreated, a memory that he deeply regretted, especially because he didn't intervene. The investigation uncovered more connections. Francisco often traveled between Jalisco and Aguascalientes to develop photos. Investigators also pointed out that the dumpster where Dylan's body was discovered was near the Asociación de Artesanos' meeting place, suggesting Francisco was connected to the area. The search led to Araceli González Becerra, Dylan's grandmother, who identified Dylan's remains and belongings, especially the floral blanket he was wrapped in, which the family had owned for over 20 years. DNA tests confirmed Araceli was Dylan's grandmother. With Dylan's identity now established and suspicion firmly on Francisco and Liliana, the story returned to national headlines. The heightened interest prompted Sylvia Pinal's program to produce a second installment of the episode, this time presenting updated details from the investigation. Despite the renewed attention, both Liliana and Francisco managed to remain fugitives for years. In 2003, a new clue surfaced. A man resembling Francisco visited a family services office in Jalisco, Mexico, to ask about adopting a child. He said his son had recently died. However, authorities believed he might have been trying to have another child to pretend was Dylan if anyone asked about the boy's disappearance. Shortly after this, Liliana and Francisco disappeared again. Investigators then theorized that they might have entered the United States. This possibility led the FBI to begin its own search and add the couple to its most wanted list. In Mexico, the pursuit was hampered by a trail of false leads. The suspects moved constantly, rarely staying long in one place. Reports surfaced that Francisco would take out loans in the cities where they stayed, only to disappear without repaying them. Since 2002, Liliana and Francisco had been living in Chetumal, the capital of Quintana Roo, under false identities. Without the authorities knowing, they remained undetected there for over 20 years. They started a new life with their daughter and the twins, who were born shortly before Dylan's death. Francisco continued his work as a photographer, while Liliana, now called Fabiola, sold flowers in Chetumal. Neighbors remembered seeing her walking around town with the younger children, known locally as the Little Twins. Some recalled that she often pretended to be pregnant, supposedly to gain sympathy and increase her flower sales. In Chetumal, most residents simply saw them as an ordinary family, unaware of their past. The mystery surrounding their location ended when a crucial piece of evidence came to light, changing the direction of the investigation. Official reports indicate that Liliana started therapy after claiming to be a victim of domestic violence. During therapy, she mentioned incomplete details about her past, specifically a crime that occurred in Jalisco in November 1999. While her statements were unclear, someone close to her used this information to investigate further. This person linked Liliana's fragmented memories to the unsolved case of a boy found in a dumpster in Aguascalientes and then reported it to the authorities in Aguascalientes. With this lead, a coordinated operation was launched between the authorities of Aguascalientes and Quintana Roo. On the night of Saturday, the 4th of January, 2025, Agents from both states moved in. Liliana, now 49 years old, and Francisco, 55, were arrested and named as the primary suspects in the murder of Dylan Randall Mercado. Days later, it was confirmed that Liliana and Francisco would be extradited to Aguascalientes on Thursday, the 9th of January, 2025. After reviewing the collected evidence, a judge ordered their formal imprisonment, ruling that there was sufficient proof to hold them responsible. Liliana and Francisco were charged with aggravated intentional homicide, classified under the state's penal code as a killing committed with advantage and brutal ferocity. If found guilty, they could face sentences of up to 40 years in prison. Liliana's family believes she was also a victim, subjected to long-term abuse and manipulation by Francisco. They suggest that years of physical and emotional control may have forced her to protect him, or even participate in the crime against her will. They claim Francisco physically killed Dylan while dominating Liliana. However, Liliana's silence for many years, her choice to live under an assumed name, and her continued relationship with Francisco while in hiding cast doubt on these claims. Public opinion remains divided. Was she an unwilling accomplice? Or did she act knowingly alongside her partner? Adding to the complexity, legal analysts have pointed out that the arrest took place barely a year before the statute of limitations for aggravated intentional homicide under the 1999 Penal Code would have expired in 2026. This timing meant the window for justice was almost closed. In the end, Liliana and Francisco's capture, though delayed by decades, was seen as a symbolic victory in the fight against impunity. For many, it was also a measure of justice for a boy whose short life had been defined by neglect, violence, and betrayal. Margarita passed away on the 8th of January, 2018. She and Dylan share the same grave. Dylan's story is not just about a terrible crime. It's about right and wrong. Liliana's involvement is especially disturbing. Some argue she was manipulated and abused, while others say she failed to act and was complicit. Before Liliana met Francisco, he had already lost a child in a questionable way. Despite this, she chose to be with him, let him care for her son, and, according to several accounts, even joined in mistreating the boy. Even if she was forced to, she still abandoned her child. If Liliana feared for her safety or her children's, she had years to get help. Instead, she stayed silent, rebuilt her life with the man accused of murdering her son, and hid the truth. Staying with him, knowing what he had done, was more than just weakness. It was, at the very least, a failure to protect her child as a mother should. The killing of Dylan was not solely the act of one violent man. It was also the result of a mother's moral and emotional abandonment. Justice may have finally caught up with them, but the case forces an uncomfortable reflection. The most vulnerable often remain invisible victims when those entrusted with their protection choose fear, convenience, or complacency over action. Flordelis dos Santos de Souza was born on February 5, 1961, in the Jacarazinho favelas in northern Rio de Janeiro. She grew up in a struggling family as the youngest of two children to Carmazina and Francisco. Her father, an artist and musician, had a modest income, while her mother ran a small home-based daycare. Flordelis and her older brother were raised in one of Rio's most troubled, crime-ridden neighborhoods. Their small, fragile house lacked basic utilities like running water and proper sanitation, and residents suffered from poor hygiene, poverty, and recurring health issues due to limited access to clean water. The Jacarazinho slum, home to more than 65,000 people in the mid-20th century, was characterized by widespread poverty, high unemployment, illegal weapons, and banned substances. Despite facing many challenges, the community here still maintains solidarity, supports each other and tries to access education and health services from the government. However, progress was often short-lived, as facilities fell into disrepair or were abandoned due to increasing crime and lack of funding. This was the harsh environment Flordelis experienced during his teenage years. During this time, missionaries and street preachers began spreading religious teachings in the favelas, offering spiritual hope to residents. Among the most influential were Pentecostal ministers, who emphasized personal experiences with God, especially through baptism. Flordelis's parents soon embraced Pentecostal Christianity, with her father hosting prayer meetings in their home and believing he had received a spiritual gift. Flordelis, deeply spiritual from a young age, became heavily involved in church activities. Her vocal talent stood out, and she often sang solo during services. She believed faith could heal, transform lives, and fulfill dreams, and her passion inspired others. As a teenager, Flordelis began leading prayer meetings herself, recognizing her ability to influence people. Her energy and conviction made her a compelling figure, and she felt a divine sense of purpose, believing she was chosen to spread her message. She mentored others and became a preacher, venturing into the most dangerous parts of the favelas to speak about faith, redemption, forgiveness, and hope. Her charisma and sincerity drew even hardened individuals to stop and listen, something few others could achieve. This mission solidified her role as a spiritual leader, paving the way for what many later considered an empire. As she grew up, Flordelis became a spiritually influential figure, starting her career in the field of spirituality. She became famous worldwide and was called the Mother of the Nation. However, this image collapsed when investigations revealed a darker side of her life. Beneath her public persona, authorities uncovered financial schemes, chaotic personal relationships, alleged violent plots, and teenage bodyguards loyal to her every word. This hidden reality dismantled her once-admired reputation and exposed a complex, controversial figure. At just 14, Flordelis faced a crushing tragedy. In 1975, her father and older brother died in a car accident, leaving her and her mother, Carmazina, to support one another through the grief. Despite the heartbreaking loss, Flordelis remained resilient, interpreting the tragedy as a test of faith. Determined to make a difference, she convinced her mother to rent a small venue to host prayer meetings. Even at a young age, she showed leadership and a deep connection with others. Her sermons were passionate and inspiring, quickly drawing a growing group of followers. At 20, Flordelis got married. While little is known about her husband, he was deeply religious and became involved with her through her sermons. They had 3 sons and seemed to share a strong bond despite living in the tough environment of the favelas. By the age of 30, she was a widow, left to raise her 3 sons alone. During this challenging time, her mother played a crucial role in helping her. Together, they ran a small daycare, while Flordelis continued hosting prayer gatherings on weekends. Her connection to her faith deepened, and so did her influence. She began claiming visions, spiritual gifts, and divine messages from God about her purpose to guide lost souls back to righteousness. These claims resonated deeply with her followers, further intensifying their devotion to her. As crime and substance abuse worsened in her city, Flordelis felt compelled to intervene. She organized her followers and ventured into dangerous neighborhoods, preaching redemption and encouraging those struggling with crime or addiction to transform their lives through faith. She focused especially on teenagers and young adults, believing they were more likely to be saved and steered away from crime. Her compassionate yet persuasive approach often succeeded, and her ability to connect with the youth became a hallmark of her work. Flordelis would frequently share stories of her fearless encounters, which solidified her reputation. In one account, she was encircled by a street gang but remained calm, telling them that her fate was in God's hands. Impressed by her bravery, they let her go unharmed. Stories like these fueled her followers' belief that she was more than just a preacher. They began to see her as a prophet, someone sent by God to lead souls to salvation. Encouraged by the glowing admiration of her followers, Flordelis began expanding her outreach. In the early 1990s, she established a shelter for teenagers and young adults, offering a safe haven, food, and support to anyone in need. On the surface, Her work appeared noble and only solidified her respected position in the community. However, it soon became clear that many of the minors living under her care were not homeless or abandoned. Some had families but chose to leave due to strained relationships or personal conflicts. Flordelis rarely asked questions about their pasts, welcoming anyone who sought refuge. Flordelis did not legally adopt the teenagers who lived in her home. Instead, she allowed them to stay for as long as they wished. Although this arrangement was unconventional, child welfare authorities ignored it for a long time. Her household operated without strict rules or schedules, and people were free to come and go. Word spread among young people that living with Flordelis was like a dream come true, which led many to move in. This caused tension with the families of those who left to join her, but her congregation and supporters praised her as a savior. For Flordelis, the priority was ensuring that the young people in her home felt happy and safe. She provided them with emotional stability, security, and hope for a better future. Many of the young people she took in chose to be baptized under her guidance and embraced her faith. Her home became crowded, filled with people of all ages, backgrounds, and neighborhoods, including favelas across the city, yet no one seemed to complain. In 1992, Anderson do Carmo, a 15 years old from a troubled background, joined Flordelis's household during a difficult time in his life. He quickly became one of her favorites, evidenced by the special attention she showed him. Others observed that Anderson, who was tall, athletic, and striking, appeared to be romantically linked to Flordelis's older daughter, Simone. The two spent a lot of time together and were believed to be a couple, but events soon took an unexpected turn. When Anderson turned 18, he and Flordelis openly began a romantic relationship. Less than a year later, they made their relationship official, despite Flordelis being 16 years older than him. Their age difference stirred some controversy, with rumors circulating that their romance may have started while Anderson was still underage, rumors that neither confirmed nor denied. Despite the gossip, they appeared deeply committed to each other. Anderson supported her completely, and together they started a church. Although they did not have biological children, they co-managed the group home that Flordelis had established. About a year after they formalized their relationship, a woman approached Flordelis during a sermon, tearfully confessing that she had abandoned her newborn in a favela due to her inability to care for the child. Flordelis accompanied the woman to retrieve the baby, whom she took in and eventually adopted legally. Shortly afterward, the same woman returned with other women who had similar stories. They brought young children, explaining that the children had been left without guardians due to unrest in the area and harsh law enforcement actions. Despite having limited space, Flordelis and Anderson welcomed them all into their home. News of their compassion spread, leading to media coverage that celebrated Flordelis as a warm-hearted preacher caring for a growing number of rescued children. Flordelis's story captured public attention far beyond Brazil, appearing in international news outlets, television programs, and newspapers. While she became a symbol of charity, government agencies began scrutinizing her household. It was revealed that Flordelis lacked legal custody of most of the children and did not have the financial resources to fully support them all. Additionally, her home operated without much oversight or structure, and residents were allowed to come and go as they pleased. When the story became public, it triggered a massive scandal. Authorities opened a criminal investigation against Flordelis, accusing her of harboring minors and claiming she unlawfully kept children in her care. As mentioned earlier, many of these children had families who began demanding justice, pressing for her prosecution. In response, Flordelis gathered all the children under her care and quietly moved to another favela. However, this relocation did not stop the legal proceedings. Flordelis announced plans to hold a press conference, stating she wanted a public platform to explain her side of the story and defend herself. Media outlets scrambled to cover the event, eager to hear from the controversial figure. At the press conference, Flordelis stated she was unafraid of standing trial, maintaining that she had done nothing illegal. She also mentioned plans to appeal to the United Nations for support. Her passionate speech resonated with many, leading to public support and a renewed status as a national figure. She eventually gained legal custody of several of the children in her care. Business leaders stepped in to assist her, helping her purchase a spacious, well-equipped home that could house over 50 teens. The property included a multi-car garage, which she converted into a worship space. Her home-based church services soon became a profitable venture. Flordelis and her husband, Anderson, introduced tithing by asking their followers to donate 10% of their income. The growing publicity around her name attracted numerous sponsors and charitable organizations. With their help, she established her first official church on the site of an old tram depot. Her sermons began drawing crowds of more than 5,000 people daily, but her singing most captivated the audience. Realizing the potential to expand her influence, Flordelis launched a music career. In 1998, she released her debut album, followed by 8 more studio albums, 1 live album, and a video album. In 2002, she gained further recognition when one of Brazil's most popular TV programs honored her live on air. She was awarded the title Mother of the Nation for her dedication to helping underprivileged youth, solidifying her celebrity status. Soon after, a Brazilian filmmaker approached her about making a documentary about her life, highlighting her religious work and community involvement. The project, featuring notable actors and TV personalities, premiered at an international film festival and further enhanced her public image. It's worth noting that in the early 2000s, Flordelis unsuccessfully attempted to enter politics, running for city council and later for the mayor's office in São Gonçalo. Both campaigns ended in defeat. Her political breakthrough came in 2018 when she was elected to the Chamber of Deputies, representing Rio de Janeiro. That same year, she gained parliamentary immunity. Together with her husband, Anderson, she established 8 branches of their church and a network of merchandise stores selling products featuring her image and motivational quotes. Their religious empire grew rapidly, along with their income and influence. Flordelis and Anderson eventually relocated to one of the most upscale neighborhoods in Rio de Janeiro and purchased a luxurious mansion. They drove high-end cars, employed household staff, and hired private security. Despite their significant age difference, many saw their marriage as ideal. They frequently appeared together in public, with Anderson handling her affairs as her manager and accountant. Over time, however, Anderson's public presence began to overshadow Flordelis. He became a preacher and church pastor, took on critical decision-making responsibilities, and managed their finances. Anderson monitored all expenditures closely, to the point where Flordelis couldn't spend money without his approval. This control frustrated her, and tensions between them grew. Their relationship began to deteriorate, but a divorce would harm Flordelis's public image. Hoping to reconcile, she prepared a romantic evening on June 15, 2019. They spent hours dining at a restaurant before taking a walk along the waterfront late into the night. They returned home just before dawn. According to Flordelis, on the way back, 2 men on motorcycles followed them. Anderson tried to evade them but failed. However, they eventually reached home safely. While Flordelis went inside, Anderson stayed outside to park the car in the garage. Moments later, gunshots were heard. Flordelis reportedly attempted to run outside but was stopped by one of her adopted sons, who advised her not to see what had happened. Anderson had been shot multiple times, nearly 30 bullets were fired, most of which struck him. He died almost instantly. The news of the crime against Flordelis's husband, Anderson, made headlines across Brazil, sparking shock and speculation throughout the country. Many believe the attack might have been politically motivated, with Flordelis as the intended target. To honor her husband, she held an all-night prayer vigil at one of her churches, attracting thousands of supporters who offered comfort and sympathy. Meanwhile, law enforcement began a thorough investigation, reviewing surveillance footage. Several inconsistencies in Flordelis's account quickly emerged. First, traffic cameras showed no evidence of the mysterious motorcycles she claimed to have seen. Second, the security cameras around their home had a blind spot covering the garage, where the incident occurred. However, one camera captured something unusual. About 20 minutes before the shooting, a taxi arrived at the house. One of Flordelis's adopted sons got out of the car, entered the house briefly, then left in another waiting vehicle. This son, Lucas dos Santos do Carmo, became a focus of the investigation, as he had a prior record for distributing banned substances. When interrogated, Lucas admitted to stopping by the house to stash money from a deal. Under pressure, he confessed that a week before the incident, he had secretly bought a firearm at the request of Flavio dos Santos, another adopted son of Flordelis. Though Flavio was legally an adult, he still lived in her house. Following the attack, he disappeared, but authorities apprehended him 3 days later. During questioning, he admitted to being involved in Anderson's murder but refused to provide further details. Police then interviewed more of Flordelis's adopted children, uncovering shocking revelations. It became evident that Flordelis was not directly involved in raising her children. Instead, a strict hierarchy existed within the household. Younger or newer members were assigned to older ones, and Flordelis emphasized their collective mission to protect her at all costs. In essence, her children acted as a personal security force, an inner circle of loyal followers willing to do anything for her. Each had specific roles, and disobedience led to severe punishment. Investigators discovered that the plan to kill Anderson had been in the works for almost a year. Over 10 of Flordelis's children were reportedly involved. Initially, there were 6 failed attempts to poison him. When poisoning proved unsuccessful, Flordelis allegedly adopted a new approach. Using her authority and the fears she commanded, she influenced the next steps. However, during questioning, she denied any involvement. As suspicion grew, she tried to shift the blame entirely onto her adopted sons, claiming she was unaware of the plan. She alleged that Anderson had been unfaithful and that her sons, after finding incriminating messages on his phone, acted on their own. But her story conflicted with consistent and detailed statements from her children. Investigators also uncovered that Flordelis had inappropriate relationships with several of her adult adopted sons, while her legal husband, Anderson, had become an obstacle in her life. Authorities arrested 6 of Flordelis's adopted sons for their involvement in the murder plot, but she could not initially be detained due to her parliamentary immunity. Nonetheless, public outrage was swift. Many of her followers abandoned her, and the religious empire she had built began to crumble, along with her reputation and influence. In 2021, Flordelis dos Santos de Souza was stripped of her immunity and brought to trial. In November 2022, she was found guilty of orchestrating the murder. The crime itself was carried out by her adopted son Flavio. Flordelis was sentenced to 50 years in prison, effectively a life sentence. Flavio dos Santos, who pulled the trigger, received a 33-year sentence, while Lucas dos Santos do Carmo, who obtained the weapon, was sentenced to 7 years. Other participants in the plot received lighter sentences. On January 17, 2020, Colin Jeffrey C.J. Haney, also known as C.J., a 16-year-old, deliberately murdered his mother and 3 younger siblings in their Grantsville, Utah home. The killings occurred over a period of 5 hours. This was not a spontaneous act or an accident, but a planned and thought-out crime that destroyed the sense of security in a town that had been homicide-free for almost 20 years. The Haney family appeared to be the perfect Mormon family, strong in their faith, close-knit, and pillars of their Grantsville community. However, appearances were deceiving. Within their home, problems were overlooked, pleas for assistance were disregarded, and a teenager was secretly planning a terrible act. In public, the Haneys represented the values that made Grantsville a desirable place to live. Consuelo Alejandra Haney, a beloved 52-year-old mother, was the heart of her family. Born in Chihuahua, Mexico, Consuelo dedicated her life to her children. Known in the neighborhood as an exceptionally talented cook, some joked she could even advise Gordon Ramsay. She also loved gardening, particularly tending to her fruit trees. She was always ready to assist members of her church and community. All 3 of her children were deeply loved. Alexis, 15, a freshman at Grantsville High School, possessed a quiet confidence. She excelled as the junior varsity soccer team's goalkeeper, displayed exceptional artistic talent, and played the piano beautifully. A fan of The Lord of the Rings, she even created an Iron Man sculpture that is still proudly displayed in her uncle's home. Matthew, 14, an 8th grader, was a strategic thinker who could anticipate chess moves far in advance. A passionate Star Wars enthusiast, he often quoted. He was admired by teachers and classmates for his kindness and competitive nature. Matthew made Boy Scout trips memorable with his sense of humor. Milan, 12, a 7th grader, had dreams of becoming an engineer. Despite her sweet appearance, she was known for her toughness. She played soccer and volleyball with great determination and no fear, shared her artistic talents with her sister Alexis, and often left encouraging notes around the house signed with a playful pseudonym. At birthday parties, other children eagerly anticipated her turn at the piñata, confident that her strength would break it open for them all. Colin Haney Sr., the 50-year-old father, survived the tragedy. His 24-year-old son, Danny, was away at Utah Valley University when the events occurred and was unaware of what was about to happen to his family. The children had been homeschooled for most of their lives, which led to strong sibling bonds that neighbors noted were very protective. The family had moved to Grantsville in 2010 and were seen as a model family. However, Colin Jeffrey C.J. Haney, a 16-year-old member of the Haney family, was secretly struggling. He was fighting unseen battles, and although warning signs had appeared over the previous months, his family didn't realize how serious the situation was. About 6 months before the murders, CJ switched from being homeschooled to attending public high school. While this might seem like a good change for most teenagers, a chance to make friends and have a typical school experience, it triggered a psychological breakdown in CJ. CJ's move to high school was very difficult, and his struggles worried everyone. He had anxiety, which made it hard for him to deal with normal social situations. He also had a speech problem, which made him feel even more self-conscious and reluctant to speak in class or with other students. Later, lawyers would say he had impoverished social skills, meaning he wasn't ready for the complicated social world of high school. School staff described CJ as reserved and quiet, but that didn't fully explain how isolated he felt. He had been homeschooled his whole life and was always surrounded by his family. Suddenly, he was in an environment where he felt completely alone. Neighbors noticed that CJ seemed like an easy target for bullies because he hadn't found his place at school. His home life was very different from his school life, which was upsetting. At home, CJ was close to his siblings, who always looked out for each other. People often commented on how close the Haney children were, likely because they were homeschooled together for years. But at Grantsville High School, CJ was just a shy teenager with a stutter and social anxiety, trying to fit in with the other students who seemed much more confident and popular. CJ had poor social skills, an anxiety disorder, and a significantly delayed education. He also had a speech impediment and had lived a mostly isolated life, making it hard for him to adjust to public school. Before the murders, he had never been in trouble with the law, used banned substance or alcohol, or been involved in gangs. He seemed to be a troubled teenager, but not someone who was naturally dangerous. He was simply overwhelmed by his difficult situation. In the fall and winter of 2019, CJ's mental health quickly declined due to increasing conflicts with his father. A prosecutor later described these conflicts as typical teenage arguments about things like going to school, attending church, spending time with friends, and playing video games. However, these arguments caused CJ immense stress. They weren't just simple disagreements, they constantly reminded him that he felt like he was disappointing his family. In his meetings with a therapist after the murders, CJ revealed that, in the months leading up to the killings, his social isolation and arguments with his father had increased dramatically. According to court documents, he felt constantly judged and criticized. Believing he was failing to meet his father's expectations, he retreated further into himself rather than seeking help or attempting to communicate his struggles. A crucial missed opportunity could have changed everything, but fear and stigma got in the way. About a month before the murders, around late December 2019 or early January 2020, Danny had a conversation with his mother, Consuelo Alejandra Haney, that stayed with him. Alejandra told Danny that CJ was making her feel unsafe with worrying statements, and she realized CJ needed help. As his mother, she knew CJ well and could see he was struggling. She reportedly talked to their father, Colin Sr., about getting CJ therapy or other mental health treatment. However, Colin supposedly refused. The family's decision was driven by fear of the shame associated with mental health treatment, fear of how it would affect their standing in their religious community, and fear of legal repercussions if CJ admitted violent thoughts to a therapist. Danny later expressed his profound regret in court, saying, "The irony is CJ still ended up in jail, and the rest of his family is dead." He believed things could have been different, while not excusing his brother's actions, but more with sadness than anger, stating that CJ's problems seemed to begin about 6 months before the tragedy when he transitioned from homeschooling to high school. Danny added, he was not trying to excuse or justify what CJ has done. CJ knows what he did, and he support whatever sentencing happens, but Danny feel like this could have been prevented. As winter turned to January 2020, CJ spiraled deeper into isolation, rage, and distorted thinking. He was consumed by anger at his father's restrictions and criticisms, terrified of continuing to disappoint his family, and plagued by thoughts he couldn't control or understand. Tragically, no one realized that CJ wasn't simply contemplating escaping his problems anymore, he was planning to eliminate them entirely. Friday, January 17, 2020, began normally for the Haney family. However, CJ had been planning for weeks to commit an act that would change everything. He intended to use his family's daily routines, specifically, who arrived home at what time, to carry out his plan. On that Friday, CJ stayed home from school, claiming to be sick. But instead of resting, he spent the morning carefully preparing to murder his family. He took 2 guns from the family's collection and hid ammunition around the house. His plan was methodical and terrifying. He would wait for each family member to return home and kill them one by one before they could find the bodies of the others. At 1 p.m., Consuelo and her 12-year-old daughter, Milan, arrived home after Consuelo picked her up from school. This was a typical routine for them. As they entered their house through the front door, CJ shot them both. He fired multiple shots at close range, hitting their heads, necks, and upper bodies, killing them instantly. Consuelo had recently sought mental health treatment for CJ, the very child who killed her. Milan, the youngest victim. They was killed with the family handgun, the same weapon that would take 4 lives that day. Around 2 p.m., Alexis arrived home from school. She walked into a house where her mother and youngest sister lay dead. CJ followed his 15-year-old sister and fired 5 shots into her head and chest. For the next 3 hours, CJ remained in the house with the bodies of his family. This showed a disturbing level of self-control that later shocked investigators. During this time, 2 neighbors stopped by. These visits highlighted CJ's unsettling ability to seem normal despite the horrific scene inside. One neighbor had a routine matter to discuss. The other was the sister's piano teacher, who was concerned because Alexis and Milan had missed their lessons. Both neighbors said CJ seemed perfectly normal when he answered the door. He was polite, explained the sister's absence with believable reasons, and showed no signs of being upset or acting strangely. He spoke to them calmly, just a few feet away from the bodies of his mother and sisters. Matthew came home from a birthday party at 5:17 p.m. He was close to his older brother, CJ, and likely eager to tell him about the party. Matthew entered the house, calling out to his family, expecting the usual lively atmosphere. However, CJ shot Matthew in the head at very close range. Prosecutors later described the killing as an execution. The way Matthew was killed, near CJ, trusting him enough to approach without fear, showed how severely CJ had lost touch with reality. At 6:15 p.m., Colin Haney Sr. arrived home to find the house dark and quiet. Thinking his family was out, he called out, expecting them to answer. Instead, his son, CJ, appeared in the darkness and pointed a gun at his father's chest. CJ fired several shots, but only one bullet hit Colin in the leg. As they fought, CJ confessed that he had killed his mother and siblings and planned to kill everyone else in the house except himself. Colin begged for his life, saying his mother would be sad if he killed him, but CJ coldly replied that she was already dead. The fight lasted about an hour. CJ repeatedly hit his father in the head with the gun, causing him to bleed, but Colin continued to fight back. The violence stopped when a neighbor arrived to return house keys and found them struggling. Colin managed to take the gun from CJ, ending the 5-hour killing spree. The investigation started after a neighbor called 911 around 7 p.m. She then drove Colin and CJ to Mountain West Medical Center in Tooele. In the car, CJ calmly confessed to killing his family. This confession became important evidence used to convict him. At approximately 7 p.m., Grantsville police were called to a shooting at 93 Southeast Drive. Officers arrived to find a scene that deeply disturbed them. They discovered 4 bodies inside the house. Each victim had been shot multiple times with the same family handgun. The organized nature of the crime scene led investigators to believe that the killings were planned and systematic, not a result of sudden anger or a domestic fight. The investigation faced immediate challenges, despite CJ's confession to the neighbor during the car ride to the hospital. CJ refused to speak with investigators once he was formally taken into custody. This sudden shift from confession to silence hampered efforts to determine his motive and understand the psychological factors that had led to the murders. The Utah Bureau of Forensic Services carefully analyzed a complex case that became one of the most difficult in the region's history. Investigators found multiple locations in the house where shots were fired. They also found evidence that Colin struggled with his son. Ballistics tests showed that the same family handgun was used to kill all the victims. The investigators stated that the investigation continues, and police are examining electronic devices like laptops and phones to determine a possible motive. The investigation showed how each victim was killed. Alexis was shot 5 times in the head and chest, Matthew was executed with 1 shot to the head, and Consuelo and Milan were both shot multiple times in the head, neck, and upper body. Investigators were especially disturbed by the timeline of events, pieced together from witness accounts and forensic evidence. The murders occurred over a 5-hour period. Between each killing, CJ calmly waited for the next family member to come home. During this time, he spoke normally with 2 neighbors, showing no signs of being upset, even though there were 3 dead bodies inside the house. Despite the extensive investigation, authorities never fully established CJ's motive beyond his statements about anger toward his father and fear of family rejection. CJ's mental health profile indicated a high risk for violence due to a combination of factors. At age 16, mental health experts noted that he had substantial learning difficulties, extreme anxiety, poor social skills, and emotional development that was not appropriate for his age. These issues, combined with his isolation and troubled family life, made him particularly vulnerable and unable to handle typical teenage pressures. His defense attorney highlighted key constitutional differences between children and adults. He argued that children are more easily influenced negatively and have less developed character than adults. He described his client, CJ, as a troubled teen who lacked skills and support, and whose brain was still developing. Yet, CJ's psychological profile also revealed calculating elements that distinguished him from typical juvenile offenders. He told police his intention was to kill everyone in the house except himself, explaining his reasoning in chillingly logical terms. This wasn't impulsive rage, it was strategic thinking about how to avoid consequences. The prosecutor argued that CJ killed his victims because he was angry at his father. This anger, the prosecutor claimed, arose from typical disagreements between teenagers and their parents about topics like school, religion, friends, and video games. He argued that these murders were not simply the result of teenage anxiety or immaturity. He emphasized that almost every 16-year-old has, throughout history, chosen not to commit such a crime. But CJ's reasoning revealed something even more chilling. He explained that he killed his mother and siblings because he feared his family would turn on him if he only killed his father. This demonstrated a capacity for strategic thinking even amid severe psychological distress. CJ's plan was methodical and premeditated. Prosecutors revealed CJ intended to kill his family and possibly burn down the house, seeking what he called a clean slate and a new opportunity in life. This wasn't about ending his pain, it was about erasing his family to start over. The most painful detail emerged from CJ's brother, Danny. At the sentencing, Danny shared that a month before the murders, their mother, Consuelo Alejandra Haney, told him that CJ had been saying disturbing things. CJ had also spoken to their father about going to therapy. This was a critical point. Consuelo had noticed CJ's troubling thoughts and wanted him to get help. However, Colin Haney Sr. rejected the idea. This statement highlighted the most tragic part of the situation: it could have been prevented. The family's fear of legal trouble stopped them from getting mental health help, which ultimately led to the very outcome they were trying to avoid. 4 people died because they saw seeking help as a danger, not a necessity. For the most part, CJ didn't really have any issues until about 6 months before all of this happened, when he transitioned from homeschooling to high school. Danny testified he felt like this could have been prevented. A mother's instinct to protect her child by getting him help was overruled by a father's fear of stigma, and that decision cost 4 lives. On January 22, 2020, 16-year-old Colin Jeffrey CJ Haney was charged with the following crimes, all of which are first-degree felonies: 4 counts of aggravated murder, 1 count of attempted aggravated murder, and 5 counts of felony discharge of a firearm resulting in serious bodily injury. Because Utah law mandates that murder suspects age 16 or older are tried as adults, CJ will be tried as an adult. The judge set his bail at $4 million, which is $1 million for each family member he is accused of murdering. It's just the most horrific tragedy for the entire family, for their friends, and this close-knit community, Haney's attorney told reporters. On July 19, 2022, Colin Jeffrey CJ Haney pleaded guilty to all charges. On July 12, 2023, he was sentenced to 5 terms ranging from 25 years to life in prison, 4 of which are to be served consecutively. Colin Haney Sr., present at sentencing, declined to make a statement. His surviving son, Danny, addressed the court via audio call, explaining the family had seen red flags about a month before the murders and that he was robbed by not getting proper help. Danny said this could have been prevented for Grantsville. Healing came slowly. Yellow ribbons appeared throughout town on trees, lamp posts, and fences. Online fundraisers raised over $100,000 for the surviving family members. The case remains Utah's deadliest mass shooting since 2007, a stark reminder of how mental health struggles and missed interventions can lead to devastating consequences. Justice may have been served, but for the survivors, the pain will last a lifetime, knowing that help was just a therapy session away, and that sometimes the greatest danger comes from within the very walls we call home. Blake Hadley was a tall, imposing man who might have seemed intimidating to some, but to his loved ones, he was more like a gentle giant. His wife, Mary Jo, was his opposite in many ways, fiery and energetic. Blake grew up in Florida alongside his brother and sister and attended the local university. While he was known for being a homebody, he was also friendly and social. In the 1980s, he graduated with honors and began building his career, hoping to find happiness and start a family. Mary Jo was born in Bradford, Pennsylvania, and grew up with 2 brothers and a sister. She was known as a sweet and caring person. Despite their differences, Blake and Mary Jo shared many common interests and quickly formed a strong connection. After meeting in the early 1980s, they began dating within a week and soon got married. They moved to Port St. Lucie, Florida, where they bought a spacious home and planned to raise a large family. Their first son, Ryan, was born shortly after the move. 6 years later, the family welcomed a second son, Tyler. However, Tyler's birth was difficult. Tyler was born prematurely at 36 weeks, leading to breathing issues that required him to stay in the hospital for 3 weeks. During that time, Mary spent all her time with her son, trying to care for and support him. However, this was a difficult time for her because Tyler's health condition did not allow her many opportunities to hold and be close to him. Later, Mary believed this early lack of bonding contributed to Tyler's behavioral problems, which began at a young age and worsened over time. Tyler was a sickly child, suffering from severe chickenpox at just 3 months old and being diagnosed with autoimmune hypothyroidism at the age of 4. He also became fixated on his weight early on, fearing he might gain too much. As Tyler entered high school, his struggles worsened. He developed severe acne, which affected his self-esteem, and Mary worked hard to support him by ensuring he received treatments like braces and frequent doctor visits. Despite her efforts, Tyler remained insecure about his appearance, constantly taking medications for his thyroid condition, obsessing over his weight even though he was slim, and fixating on his height. Determined to match his father's tall stature, Tyler convinced Mary to let him take growth hormone injections, a decision others found strange, considering he was already taller than most of his friends. During this time, Tyler also began exhibiting other troubling behaviors. He had an early fascination with dark humor and often made inappropriate comments, which made many perceive him as odd. By 2010, things escalated. Tyler was caught drinking and smoking marijuana multiple times. His behavior became more reckless when he and some friends broke into an empty house, stole items, and set an old sofa on fire in a nearby nature reserve using gasoline. Although the teens were caught, no charges were filed due to their age. Nevertheless, these incidents deeply alarmed Tyler's family. As his actions grew more concerning, Mary tried to exert stricter control over her son, but her efforts proved unsuccessful. In April 2011, Tyler got into a physical fight with a classmate, resulting in his arrest and more serious charges. In response, his parents confiscated his cell phone and placed him under house arrest. Shortly afterwards, Tyler confided in a friend about his thoughts of self-harm but quickly abandoned the idea. Instead, he began running away from home. In July of the same year, after one such escape, he returned home in the middle of the night by climbing through a window. He was visibly drunk and high, collapsing onto the floor. His parents were at their breaking point, struggling to manage his increasingly destructive behavior. Out of concern for their son, Tyler's parents, Blake and Mary, decided to exercise their legal right to have the boy admitted to a psychiatric hospital for an emergency evaluation. This allowed for temporary supervision of individuals who might pose a risk to themselves or others. However, Tyler's stay at the hospital was brief, as the professionals determined there were no significant mental health issues that justified keeping him against his will. Tyler also declined any further assistance. Despite this setback, Tyler's mother, Mary, sought additional resources. She found a treatment center that offered intensive outpatient therapy for troubled teens, but Tyler refused to participate. Determined to support him, Mary even consulted the parents of one of Tyler's friends, who worked in a nearby psychiatric department. Throughout these efforts, Blake and Mary remained deeply concerned and tried their best to help him. By 2011, their eldest son, Ryan, had moved out of the family home, leaving Mary and Blake to focus completely on Tyler. Mary kept most details about Tyler's treatment private and was reluctant to involve other family members. She hoped to manage her son's struggles without outside interference. However, Ryan learned from his mother that Tyler was attending therapy several times a week, and he considered this a positive step. Part of the program included regular testing for banned substances, but Tyler failed one of the tests, causing his parents to question the effectiveness of the therapy. During this time, Tyler continued using various substances. He also consumed thyroid support tablets and hormonal medications because he was obsessed with the idea of becoming taller, like his father, who was 183 cm. Tyler, only 155 cm as a teenager, had unrealistic goals of drastically increasing his height. The family suspected that Tyler was using hormonal medication without consulting an endocrinologist. The medication he reportedly chose not only affected growth but also had anabolic properties. It was banned in professional sports due to its potential side effects, including negative impacts on mental health. Mary eventually opened up to friends and relatives to dispel any speculation. She admitted that she was worried about Tyler's fixation on his height and his potential to be teased. The medication, though unnecessary for him, was extremely expensive, costing several $1,000s monthly, straining the family budget. Still, Mary insisted it was worth it if it improved Tyler's self-esteem. After realizing that therapy was having limited effect, Tyler began taking medication for depression and anxiety, which was known for its strong sedative properties. However, the drug could impair memory, learning, and other cognitive functions if overused. Tyler reportedly took it before bed, possibly to help with his sleepwalking. In June 2011, Tyler and his father, Blake, went on a trip to Georgia to visit a relative of a family friend named Mike. Initially, Mary wanted Tyler to stay in Florida and attend his therapy sessions, but she eventually decided that a family trip might be beneficial. Tyler himself actively persuaded her to let him go. The trip, which included a planned hike, lasted a day longer than expected. At first, Tyler was reluctant to join the hike, but he eventually participated with his father and uncle. During the hike, a small conflict arose. Tyler behaved immaturely, walking with a stick and repeatedly hitting trees, claiming he was killing spiders. His behavior irritated his uncle, especially when Tyler made inappropriate remarks, including stating that the Menendez brothers, who had killed their parents, were his idols. One evening, Tyler asked for some paper to draw, claiming it was a therapeutic exercise recommended by the medical center. However, he ended up sketching a disturbing picture of a house, eerily resembling Uncle Mike's, completely engulfed in flames. This deeply upset Uncle Mike, who was already uneasy about Tyler's behavior. Tyler, a 17-year-old, had been waking up every night around 2 a.m. and wandering around the house. On the day of their arrival, he had gone outside and stood by the window of his uncle and aunt's bedroom, staring inside for an extended period. Both his uncle and aunt noticed this unsettling behavior and became wary of him. The following day, Uncle Mike discovered spit on the porch and became convinced that Tyler was responsible. He asked his brother, Blake, to address Tyler's behavior. By the end of their visit, despite the trip otherwise going smoothly, Tyler had left a strongly negative impression on his uncle and aunt. Once back home, Tyler's parents, Blake and Mary, intensified their efforts to discipline him. His phone was confiscated again due to his strange behavior, and his father even removed his bedroom door to prevent him from sneaking out. Despite these measures, no one could have anticipated the tragedy that was about to unfold. Tyler had already shared his sinister intentions with friends, but no one took him seriously. In June 2011, while hanging out with friends, Tyler openly talked about wanting to kill his parents, describing in detail the gruesome scene he envisioned. His friends dismissed it as a dark joke, as they had grown accustomed to his inappropriate sense of humor. Even Tyler's best friend, Michael Mandel, didn't take his comments seriously. Tyler casually explained how he would kill his parents, take their money, and throw a party to celebrate. Yet, no one believed him. On the morning of June 16, 2011, Tyler advertised a party on his social media page, inviting friends to his house later that evening. The week before, he had mentioned his plans to host a party, but everyone doubted his strict parents would ever allow it. Tyler assured his friends that his parents would be leaving, creating the perfect opportunity for the event. That morning, Tyler spoke with Michael, once again reiterating his plan to kill his parents, but Michael brushed it off as another one of Tyler's twisted jokes. By noon, friends began asking about the party, and Tyler responded that he was still sorting out the details. Later in the day, Tyler posted updates about the party online, providing his father's phone number as a contact in case anyone needed to reach him. Michael noticed that Tyler seemed to be using his father's phone, assuming that Tyler's phone had likely been confiscated again. Tyler hyped up the party, calling it grand. During the day, Tyler's parents, Blake and Mary, were at work in the city and went out for lunch, staying out until the afternoon. When they returned home, Mary worked on her computer while Blake rested for his night shift. By 10 p.m., a group of teenagers had started gathering outside Tyler's house, but Tyler was nowhere to be seen. One friend called Blake's phone, and Tyler answered, explaining that he'd be there soon and asking everyone to wait 10 to 15 minutes. When Tyler finally arrived, about 15 teenagers were waiting on the lawn. He didn't let them inside immediately, saying he needed time to put things away to prevent damage. Once the guests were allowed inside, they noticed the walls were bare. Tyler had taken down all the pictures, leaving only the nails in place. Inside, Tyler led the guests to his bedroom, where they drank alcohol, smoked weed, and listened to music. Some of the guests began to notice that the house was in complete disarray, but Tyler seemed indifferent. At one point, he brought out a plastic bag filled with strong painkillers and began distributing them to the guests, distracting them from the chaotic state of the house. As the evening progressed, more and more people, many of whom didn't know Tyler, began to arrive. By midnight, the crowd had grown significantly, and the house descended even further into chaos. During the party, Tyler pulled Michael aside and said he had something to confess. Outside, Tyler confessed that he had killed his parents, Blake and Mary, and admitted that it had been a terrible mistake. At first, Michael thought Tyler was joking, as he often made dark jokes. However, Tyler insisted he was serious. Michael noticed that Blake's and Mary's cars were still in the driveway, and it became evident that they hadn't left. Their absence and the party at their house seemed suspicious, as responsible parents wouldn't allow such a wild gathering. Doubting Tyler, Michael began to pay closer attention. Back in the house, Tyler showed Michael bloody footprints. Although still skeptical, Michael eventually noticed bloodstains on the walls, the ceiling, and the door to Blake and Mary's bedroom. Finally, Tyler confessed, taking Michael to the garage and sharing the details of the murders. Tyler explained that around 5 p.m., while everyone was in their rooms, he took a hammer and struck his mother, Mary, from behind while she worked on a computer. She died from his blows. Hearing the commotion, Tyler's father, Blake, woke up and came into the room. Tyler attacked him as well. Blake managed to ask why Tyler was doing this, to which Tyler chillingly replied, "Why not?" Before killing him, Tyler admitted he had planned the murders. Beforehand, he took a banned substance, hid his parents' phones, and locked the family dog in the closet to avoid interruptions. After the killings, Tyler panicked and consumed more drugs to calm himself. He listened to music in the garage before spending about 3 hours cleaning the house. He said there was far more blood than he had expected. Tyler moved evidence, including bloody items and furniture, into his parents' bedroom. He wrapped their heads in towels, placed their bodies in the room, and locked the door. Despite his efforts, traces of blood were still visible throughout the house. After cleaning, he looked at himself in the mirror, laughed, and then began preparing for the party. In preparation, Tyler stole $11,000 from a trust fund set up by his grandparents and withdrew $5,000 using his parents' bank card. He also brought painkillers to the party with the intention of taking a dose of poison and ending his own life. Michael, however, tried to reason with Tyler, suggesting he flee to another state instead. Secretly, Michael removed the bag of painkillers from Tyler's pocket to prevent him from carrying out his plan. To verify Tyler's claims, Michael inspected the house. Familiar with the layout, he checked the areas Tyler had mentioned and found evidence confirming the murders. Most of the blood had dried, resembling dirt unless closely examined. Eventually, Michael went to Blake and Mary's bedroom. When he tried to open the locked door, something blocked it. Forcing it open slightly, he used his phone's flashlight and saw a bloody leg, which he realized belonged to Blake. Back in the garage, Michael tells Tyler that he now believes Tyler. Even with this realization, Michael didn't immediately alert authorities. The party continued as teenagers took photos and enjoyed themselves. As the chaos unfolded, Michael slowly grasped the horror of the situation, realizing Tyler could harm other party guests if he wanted to. Michael confided in a friend, Jesse, and together they confirmed what Michael had seen. The two decided to leave the party discreetly, making up an excuse to avoid suspicion. After leaving, they hesitated to go home, fearing punishment from their parents for breaking curfew. Meanwhile, Tyler began telling other guests details about the murders. Unable to hold back, he showed his father's body to several attendees. Some guests, horrified, started leaving the house. Eventually, A neighbor called the police to complain about the noise. When officers arrived, they asked for the music to be turned down before leaving without investigating further. The party continued until around 3 a.m. Finally, the remaining guests noticed Tyler going into the kitchen, claiming he wanted to prepare snacks. At that moment, there was a knock on the door. Tyler took a long time to answer, and when he finally did, the police were standing there again. It turned out that Tyler's friend had been trying desperately to report a double murder but couldn't get through to the crime hotline. Undeterred, he had left a detailed voicemail describing the crime scene, naming those involved, and explaining what had happened. When a dispatcher later listened to the message, they immediately sent officers to investigate. When Tyler finally opened the door for the officers, he appeared visibly distressed. His eyes were wide, and his lips seemed to move silently, as if he were muttering to himself. Suspiciously, he kept one hand behind his back as though hiding something, possibly a weapon. However, when the police ordered him to show his hands, they were empty. He claimed his parents were in the city and that he didn't know how to contact them. The more the officers questioned him, the less his story made sense. He kept contradicting himself and seemed to be making things up as he spoke. Growing more suspicious, the police detained Tyler and placed him in a patrol car while several officers entered the house to search it. They found every room open except the master bedroom. Tyler told them the room was locked, claiming his parents, Blake and Mary, had taken the key with them when they left. However, the officers quickly noticed dried blood stains in various rooms and on the master bedroom door. They easily forced the door open by pushing on it. Inside, their attention was immediately drawn to a pile of items tossed into a heap: paintings, photographs, and other belongings. From beneath the pile, a dog locked in a closet barked frantically. Sticking out from the pile was a leg, which they quickly identified as Blake's. When an officer touched it, he realized Blake was already cold. Assistance was called, but it was too late to save him. As the officers continued their search, they found Mary's body as well. Both Blake and Mary had been dead for some time. Tyler, now the prime suspect, was read his rights and taken to the police station. On the way, he appeared strangely calm, quietly staring out the car window. For detectives, such a horrifying crime was shocking in a small and quiet town like Port St. Lucie. As they examined the house in more detail, they discovered it was in total disarray, largely due to the chaos caused by a party that had taken place. Beneath discarded beer cans, detectives found multiple bloodstains and smears. It became clear that the murders were premeditated. Tyler had begun organizing the party while his parents were still alive. Knowing his mother and father would never allow him to throw such an event, it was evident he had planned the killings in advance. The autopsy confirmed that both Blake and Mary had died from multiple hammer blows to the head and body. Interviews with neighbors painted a picture of Tyler as an unstable young man, described as having an unsettling demeanor, empty expression, and a fascination with dark ideas. The crime sent shockwaves through the community. Just days before the murders, Mary had told others she was optimistic about Tyler's progress in therapy, believing he was returning to normal. She felt happy and hopeful, completely unaware of the sinister thoughts her son was harboring. At the funeral for their parents, Tyler's older brother, Ryan, attended along with nearly 1,000 mourners. Although devastated, Ryan made the decision to visit Tyler in prison, saying he believed their parents would have wanted him to offer support. However, Ryan remained convinced Tyler deserved to spend the rest of his life in jail. Initially, some of Tyler's friends blamed his parents, accusing them of treating him harshly. But as the investigation progressed, the police uncovered the real cause of Tyler's violent behavior: his prolonged abuse of pills, banned substances, and alcohol. Over time, most people came to accept this explanation. When Tyler underwent a toxicology test, it was discovered that his blood contained a mix of pills and banned substances. He claimed that his aggression stemmed from taking antidepressants. While in prison, Tyler sent letters of apology to his family and friends, but the messages were contradictory. They suggested he might have been proud of his actions. Tyler even confessed to his cellmate that he had been planning his parents' murder for a long time, waiting until his brother, Ryan, was out of the house so he wouldn't intervene. He admitted that his anger had been building up for weeks before the murders. After the first party, Tyler started planning another one for the following night. If he hadn't been arrested, he likely would have continued throwing parties until all his parents' money was gone. Despite being charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, Tyler never admitted guilt. He tried to plead insanity, claiming he heard voices, but this was proven false. Tyler began signing autographs for his cellmates, often drawing hammers in them, which further suggested he felt no remorse for his crimes. In the trial, Tyler Hadley was found guilty on all charges. However, since he was a minor, state law prohibited a death sentence. In 2014, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. 2 years later, a higher court overturned this sentence and ruled that he should have the possibility of parole. In a 2018 retrial, Tyler was again sentenced to life imprisonment, but this time with the chance of parole. On May 22, 1996, twin sisters Odalise and Vanna Vaquiata were born in La Paz, Bolivia. They grew up in a modest but loving working-class family with their parents, Mabel and Alejandro. Odalise shared a close bond with her siblings. From a young age, Odalise was known for her warm personality, curiosity, and empathy, which endeared her to family and friends alike. Her parents instilled in her the precious values of perseverance and solidarity, helping her receive a good education and develop strong morals. Odalise attended public schools in La Paz, where her teachers recognized her as an attentive, hard-working student who was eager to participate in school projects, especially those focused on social causes. As a teenager, she entered a relationship that eventually led to marriage. By the age of 24, she became a mother and devoted herself fully to raising her son. Although her marriage ended due to differences, she and her ex-husband have maintained a cooperative and respectful relationship, always prioritizing their child's well-being. After completing high school, Odalise pursued a degree in social communication at a local university, driven by her passion for community engagement and fostering meaningful connections. She was determined to create a positive impact through her career. In early 2023, Odalise attended a friend's birthday party, where she met Joel Perez, a 24-year-old engineering student in his final year of study. Joel, known for his outgoing and sociable personality, introduced himself and struck up a brief conversation with Odalise, leaving a lasting impression. Born to Rudy Perez and Betty Garcia, Joel came from a family with ties to Bolivian law enforcement. While Joel appeared charismatic and friendly to many, some later observed traits of manipulative and emotionally volatile behavior, which had previously been overlooked. Odalise and Joel encountered each other again at another birthday party shortly afterward. Joel reminded Odalise of their previous meeting, asked for her phone number, and began regularly communicating with her. Over time, they started dating, and by late 2023, their relationship became official. Odalise frequently shared photos of them on social media, highlighting their happy moments, including travels and outings. In March 2024, as Easter weekend approached, Bolivia prepared for holiday festivities. By this time, Odalise and Joel had been together for about 8 months. They planned a trip to one of Odalise's favorite destinations to attend an Afro-Bolivian cultural festival. Her son stayed with his father while she embarked on the trip with Joel. On Saturday, March 30th, they set off in Odalise's car, with Joel driving. They stopped at a supermarket to buy groceries and alcoholic beverages before arriving at their destination around 12:30 p.m. The two enjoyed the festivities, but the trip turned tragic. That evening, Joel called the police to report that Odalise was missing. According to his account, they had an argument during their return trip sometime after 4:20 p.m. Joel stated that Odalise handed him a bag, got into her car, and drove off alone. Minutes later, she allegedly called him, saying she had driven into a ditch. Joel claimed he found her around 5:30 p.m. and helped her, but their argument persisted as they continued driving. Joel further alleged that the quarrel escalated into a physical altercation, prompting Odalise to exit the vehicle around 11 p.m. in a remote area. He stated that he tried searching for her afterward but couldn't find her. According to Joel, both had been drinking throughout the day. He then received a call from Odalise's brother, reporting that she was missing. Alarmed by Joel's account, Odalise's mother, Mabel, along with her brother and other family members, rushed to the location Joel had described. What they discovered only intensified their fears. Joel had been arrested by the police for driving under the influence. Odalise's wallet and phone were still in the car, casting doubt on Joel's story. A formal report of Odalise's disappearance was filed the same day Joel claimed she went missing. A massive search operation was immediately launched in the region where Odalise was last seen, quickly becoming one of the largest mobilizations in recent Bolivian history. The effort included national police, armed forces, rural road patrols, firefighters, local farming communities, volunteers, and Odalise's family. Search teams scoured the ground, aerial units scanned remote areas, and divers were deployed to search water bodies. Drones and helicopters monitored the countryside, while human trafficking and homicide units launched investigations. The case quickly gained media attention and went viral on social media. Within hours, the public was demanding answers. The hashtag Justice for Odalise, along with her image, spread widely, urging authorities to intensify the search. However, despite the operation's scale, the initial response was reportedly disorganized, with poor coordination among police units, insufficient resources, and a lack of communication with Odalise's family. Public pressure and media coverage heightened the urgency of the investigation. On April 1st, 2 days after Odalise disappeared, authorities arrested Joel as the primary suspect. The following day, a judge ordered his preventive detention. Forensic findings soon followed. Investigators discovered blood stains in Odalise's car, raising suspicions of foul play. DNA samples were collected and analyzed, calling into question Joel's claim that Odalise had simply exited the vehicle. The evidence suggested that a violent altercation may have taken place. Protests outside the courthouse intensified as Odalise's family and friends demanded transparency and urged Joel to confess to what had truly happened. Their demonstrations grew larger and louder over 4 consecutive days in early April. Investigators also reviewed security footage, which revealed recordings of Joel and Odalise's car passing through areas that contradicted Joel's account of their route. His version of events and timeline faced increasing scrutiny. Adding to the confusion, Odalise's phone sent messages from locations she had never visited, suggesting potential foul play or attempts to mislead investigators. By April 5th, the ongoing search involved 20 officers, sniffer dogs, and drones. A newly surfaced video showed Odalise dancing with Joel at a cultural festival on the day she disappeared. This evidence confirmed that she had attended the event, sparking speculation that she may have been alive afterward. Authorities acknowledged inconsistencies in Joel's statements, including 4 conflicting accounts of where Odalise had exited the car. These contradictions further shifted the investigation's focus toward Joel. Meanwhile, the prosecutor's office requested additional resources, such as helicopters and specialized personnel, which drew criticism from other victims' families who had not received similar support. On April 6th, Bolivia's Minister of Government announced that investigators believed they were close to finding Odalise's body. The following days were pivotal. On April 7th and 8th, the court extended Joel's preventive detention by 4 months following an appeal hearing. His defense claimed he had been mistreated and alleged torture during custody. Then, on April 9th, a shocking turn of events in the case sparked widespread national controversy. A journalist released an exclusive prison interview with Joel, sparking significant security concerns. She managed to enter the facility with cameras and an audio recorder, bypassing established security protocols. This breach caused widespread outrage and prompted an internal investigation into how prison staff failed to inspect her equipment. During the interview, Joel shared a new version of events. He claimed that after an argument, Odalise angrily left the vehicle. He admitted to driving away to scare her but denied causing her any harm. He insisted that he did not assault or kill her. As a consequence of the unauthorized interview, Joel was sanctioned by prison authorities for a serious violation, as the meeting lacked both legal approval and a formal request. In the following days, the search for Odalys intensified. Authorities deployed 5 additional drones and 22 more armed personnel to assist police search teams. A hotline was also launched to encourage the public to provide potential leads. As April progressed, new details about Joel's past began to emerge. Joel had prior reports of domestic violence and aggressive behavior, including complaints from a former partner. These revelations further undermined his credibility. Investigators also began exploring the possibility that Joel had accomplices. Evidence suggested that others in his circle may have helped him mislead authorities. One key suspect was Jose Maria Alanis, a police officer who interacted with Joel and his parents shortly after Odalys's disappearance. This connection became pivotal. The public prosecutor's office opened an investigation into Alanis for potentially serving as an accomplice and covering up evidence. Authorities accused Alanis of maintaining frequent contact with Joel's family, providing unofficial legal advice, and possibly manipulating timelines, evidence, and alibis to obstruct the investigation. It was suspected that he used his position within law enforcement to protect Joel, crossing the line between professional duty and personal involvement. Bolivian prosecutors formally charged Alanis with obstruction of justice, initiating criminal proceedings. The court placed him under house arrest during the investigation. Alanis defended himself by saying he was only assisting Joel's parents, Rudy Perez and Betty Garcia, by advising them to contact authorities. However, recovered deleted messages from Alanis's phone told a different story. These communications hinted at possible complicity, suggesting that Joel's parents may have been involved in concealing or manipulating evidence. They were asked to testify but remained evasive, claiming ignorance of the events, which only served to heighten suspicion. Meanwhile, Odalys's family remained steadfast in their pursuit of justice. They organized vigils, marches, prayer gatherings, and awareness events. On May 22, 2024, Odalys's 29th birthday, her family held a particularly moving demonstration. They lit candles, shared memories, and renewed their demands for justice. By that time, authorities had confirmed that Odalys was the victim of a violent crime, prompting her family's legal team to request her case be reclassified as feminicidio, gender-based murder. Amid this emotional turmoil, a new lead surfaced. A local vendor in the area where Odalys disappeared claimed to have seen her with another man in a nearby town. Separately, 2 police officers reported seeing Joel return alone to the celebration site between 9 and 10 p.m. on the night Odalys vanished, despite heavy traffic that evening. These claims were quickly questioned by Odalys's family, who suspected manipulation by Joel's relatives. Prosecutors began to suspect that Joel's relatives might be bribing witnesses. Reports even indicated that the vendor may have been offered money to testify in Joel's favor. In response, authorities reconstructed the events surrounding Odalys's disappearance, determined to uncover the truth. Shortly afterward, Joel's parents were formally arrested for their suspected involvement in the crime. Over the following months, a new theory emerged, suggesting that the crime had been premeditated. Evidence revealed that, days prior to the trip, Joel had conducted online searches related to gender-based violence and how to bury a body. Investigators also uncovered a potential financial motive. Odalys had entrusted Joel with her savings shortly before the trip, intending to use them for a business venture that never materialized. That money, like Odalys herself, disappeared. Despite criticism of delays and a lack of transparency in the early stages of the case, authorities intensified their efforts. By June 2024, more than 100 officers, alongside forensic experts, anti-crime units, drones, and advanced technology, were involved in the investigation. The case became increasingly complex, focusing on Joel and his network, with 134 pieces of evidence including forensic analysis, call records, text messages, and testimony from numerous friends and relatives. A major breakthrough came when Gabriel, a friend of Joel's, admitted that Joel contacted him around 4:30 a.m. on March 31st, the night Odalys disappeared. Joel claimed the police had taken Odalisa's car due to his DUI charge and asked to stay at Gabriel's house to avoid confronting his parents. Gabriel agreed, and Joel stayed until about 7:30 a.m., when he asked to borrow Gabriel's motorcycle, saying he needed to search for Odalise. Unaware of what was unfolding, Gabriel lent him the motorcycle. Shortly afterward, Joel disappeared and stopped answering calls. Later, Gabriel was stunned to learn the truth from Joel's parents. Police eventually searched Gabriel's home and found one of Joel's bags. However, Gabriel's timeline of incidents was verified, and he was cleared as a suspect. Still, he grew uneasy when Joel's mother publicly hinted that he might be blamed for the crime. Gabriel believed she was trying to deflect suspicion onto him. Months passed until December 2024, when the case took another dramatic turn. Private group chat messages between Joel and his friends were leaked, revealing critical details. The conversations not only confirmed knowledge of Odalisa's disappearance but also exposed Joel's violent behavior. Among the messages was an audio recording in which someone described how Odalise was bound, abused, and killed. The recording suggested Joel had accomplices. The chats also mentioned possible locations of Odalisa's remains, including a cabin and a river. Ultimately, they proved that Joel's inner circle knew far more than they had previously admitted. Authorities summoned the 7 people involved in the group chat for questioning. 4 of them, 3 men and 1 woman, were detained, and 2 were later held in custody. The woman, once a friend of Odalisa's, had stayed close to her family after the disappearance, likely to gather information and relay it to Joel's family. One of the men, Israel Sanana, confessed to being an accomplice and took a plea deal. He received a 2-year prison sentence, although his legal team sought early release due to his cooperation. Prosecutors also obtained additional digital evidence, including audio recordings and videos, which were submitted for analysis. The emergence of this new evidence, dated from April 1, 2024, has sparked public outrage and raised questions about why it was not considered earlier. Then, on December 27, 2024, prosecutors officially charged Joel and recommended the maximum sentence for his parents, citing overwhelming evidence of their complicity and obstruction. Despite the absence of Odalisa's body, the case now included digital traces, psychological profiles, financial records, and numerous witness statements, all pointing to the crime being premeditated and motivated by emotional and financial reasons. This case remains one of Bolivia's most widely followed, fueling public debates, discussions on legal reforms, and extensive media coverage. Its tragic details and the lack of closure have captivated the nation. Odalisa's family continues to fight tirelessly for justice, demanding answers and the return of her body. While a trial date has not yet been set, all attention remains focused on the eventual outcome. Gija Cardoso was born and grew up in Manaus, Amazonas, Brazil. She became famous for her role in the traditional Boi Bumba Garantido festival. This festival is very important culturally in the region, and performers gain public recognition. Gija was well liked for her charm and strong respect for local customs. She had a confident and captivating stage presence. After leaving the festival scene, Gija became an entrepreneur in the beauty industry. She opened a chain of salons in her hometown and soon became known as a successful businesswoman. Her earlier fame attracted customers, and she used social media to promote her brand. She frequently shared promotional content and personal updates about beauty treatments, wellness, self-care. She presented her lifestyle and looks as the results of hard work, self-discipline, and ongoing self-improvement. Gija was known for being composed and driven. Friends, clients, and followers saw her as a modern role model, someone who had built a thriving business doing what she loved. Yet little was known about her personal life. She kept her family and business world separate, maintaining an image that was professional, polished, and somewhat enigmatic. On May 28, 2024, some relatives visited Gigia's home in Manaus, Amazonas, Brazil, because they hadn't heard from her in over a day. Those who knew Gigia said that her relationship with her mother, Closimar Cardoso Rodriguez, and her brother, Ademar Cardoso, had been neutral, mostly business-related. Closimar sometimes appeared in social media posts, but Ademar generally avoided public attention. The family seemed to get along and lived together in the same house. Before 2023, Gigia had no known legal problems or mental health concerns. Friends and salon staff never reported any troubling behavior or signs of addiction. Gigia seemed dedicated to her career. Her salon's image depended on her, and her professionalism helped build trust and grow the business. The night before the incident, Gigia's mother, brother, former partner Bruno Roberto de Silva Lima, and employees from her beauty salon chain were at her house. The atmosphere was strained and isolating. Gigia seemed frail and weak, and the overall mood in the house felt surreal. Bruno recorded parts of what happened on the night of May 27th. The first video, taken at 11:40 p.m., shows Gigia holding a bottle of ketamine and a syringe. Bruno tells her to put them down and not take more, but she doesn't respond. Her face and movements suggest she's already heavily influenced by banned substance. About 30 minutes later, Bruno recorded again. Gigia is in bed, looking for the syringe cap. Bruno, sounding frustrated, tells her to stop and rest. He tried to help, but she refused. Gigia says she plans to take another dose. The others in the house seem indifferent. Bruno's behavior is questionable. He expresses concern, but mainly records the situation instead of actively trying to help Gigia, as if he were simply documenting events rather than responding to an emergency. That night, Gigia mentioned traveling or going to another dimension. Despite this, her mother, brother Bruno, and the salon staff didn't call for medical help. This reflected her family's belief that ketamine could open doors to other realities, even when she showed signs of overdosing. The following morning, Bruno told others he found Gigia not responding. Closimar, Ademar, and at least 2 salon staff members were still in the house. It was later confirmed she died around 2 a.m. Even as her health worsened, no one present sought medical assistance. Instead, they continued what seemed to be a misguided spiritual ritual. According to the family's account, Gigia hadn't died, she had temporarily left her body, claiming it was part of a spiritual practice. They believed she would awaken within 4 hours. When that didn't happen, they carried her outside into the sunlight, insisting that the morning rays would bring her soul back. She was later returned indoors. These actions created a false reality, while clinical signs showed her condition was irreversible. The videos recorded by Bruno later became central to the police investigation. These clips captured the crucial moments when things could have turned out differently. Gigia's passing wasn't sudden, it was the result of inaction and a refusal to accept reality. That night marked a turning point in what became a criminal case, sparking public outcry, not just because of the tragedy itself, but because of the complete absence of basic responsibility from those around her. A month before Gigia's death, on April 24, 2024, officers from the Manaus Civil Police responded to a call. The concern was over Gigia's rapidly declining condition. By then, Gigia had stopped answering calls, hadn't been seen leaving the house, and, according to relatives, was no longer able to walk on her own. Gigia's aunt, Cleomar Cardoso, accused Closimar and Ademar of preventing the family from taking Gigia to rehab. Officers were greeted by Closimar, Gigia's mother. She insisted that Gigia was doing fine and didn't need any help. When one officer asked to see Gigia's room, they encountered a locked door. Footage from the scene captured a tense exchange between Closimar and one of the officers. She insisted her daughter wasn't being held against her will and claimed the officers didn't have legal grounds to enter without a warrant. The recording ends just as one officer approaches the door where Gigia was believed to be. What happened next wasn't documented, but the outcome was clear: no further action was taken. According to the family, Gigia spoke briefly with the officers and declined to leave. However, it remains unclear what condition she was in during that supposed conversation. A police report dated April 24, 2024 noted concerns about Jija's confinement and substance abuse. The relatives didn't give up. They created a WhatsApp group called Saving Jija. It included family members and others who had previously noticed worrying changes in her behavior. Their goal was to get Jija out of the house and into a clinic for emergency detox, but the plan was never carried out, as relatives feared legal consequences. Klosamar held her ground, and the police didn't have the legal tools to intervene. Previous attempts to help Jija had also failed, each met with silence and denial. The house became like a fortress. From a legal standpoint, the situation appeared to be this: an adult woman was living in her home by choice, hadn't reported any mistreatment, and wasn't asking for help. On paper, there was no clear violation. This episode exposed serious flaws in the response system. Even with visible signs of severe dependency, mental instability, and physical deterioration, official procedures outweighed basic logic. April 24th would be the last documented visit by law enforcement to Jija's home. None of those trying to help took further legal steps. No one contacted the district attorney's office or called emergency medical services again. Jija never escaped the closed loop she was trapped in. A month later, she passed away without ever receiving the help she so clearly needed. The failed attempt to rescue Jija revealed just how helpless even the closest people can be when facing a rigid system. Even in a situation where a person's life was clearly at risk, the law remained blind to the harsh realities of substance dependency, and the police followed protocol. After the investigation began, police discovered that the Cardoso household in Manaus was operating under a loosely structured group with cult-like characteristics. It was called Pai, May, Vida, which translates from Portuguese to Father-Mother Life. The name appeared in rituals and symbols, including tattoos worn by some members. Behind it was a pseudo-religious belief system combining mysticism, distorted spiritual practices, and the normalization of psychoactive substance use. The ideology was promoted by Ademar Cardoso. According to authorities, he had been introduced to similar concepts during treatment for substance dependency in the United Kingdom. After returning to Brazil, he began pushing the idea of a spiritual transition allegedly attainable through ritual use of mind-altering substances. His mother, Klosamar, eventually joined him and assumed control over what took place inside the home and within their so-called community. Klosamar emerged as the dominant figure. She decided who would take substances and when. She claimed to possess a unique ability to restore energy through what she called light sessions. These rituals took place both at home and in rooms that had once operated as Jija's beauty salons. Attendees included staff members who were drawn into what the group described as spiritual practices. The group used a distinctive style of language, religious terminology, altered quotes from a series of books known as Cartas de Cristo, and invented purification formulas. During searches of the property, law enforcement discovered vials of ketamine, syringes, needles, and handwritten instructions for soul restoration. These findings pointed to a level of organization and intent far beyond what was previously assumed. The group was rigidly structured, with Klosamar making all the important choices. Ademar translated her instructions and led separate meetings. Jija, although clearly unwell, was still involved. While it seemed like she was participating willingly, her failing health suggested otherwise. Ketamine was systematically used within the group. They administered precise doses using insulin syringes, suggesting some medical understanding. They regularly obtained the ketamine from veterinary clinics, where it didn't require a prescription. The group was very isolated. They limited outside contact, refusing entry to family members and strictly controlling information. Visitors had to follow their energy rules. Those who didn't agree were considered spiritually inferior and excluded. Disagreement was not allowed. This was essentially a system of psychological manipulation disguised as a family in business. It had its own rules, leadership, rituals, banned substance protocols, and beliefs that masked dependence as spiritual growth. This false spiritual environment contributed to Jija's decline and potentially harmed others. The Cardoso family's first use of psychoactive banned substance wasn't for spiritual reasons. Relatives say it started with Jija and her brother, Ademar, wanting to lose weight fast. They felt they were overweight and wanted a quick body transformation. This led them to Jesus Marais Silveira, who claimed to be a personal trainer. It was later found that Silveira had no license or real qualifications as a fitness or health coach. The investigation revealed that Silveira introduced the family to injectable anabolic steroids, commonly known as bombs. He administered the injections himself, instructing Gija, Ademar, and later their mother, Closamar, on how to use them and what dosage to take. The family began using these performance-enhancing banned substances daily without any medical supervision. These substances were not prescribed or regulated. Relatives stated that this marked the beginning of the family's habitual use of illegal substances. At first, anabolic steroids were considered harmless, just a quick way to get the body you wanted. But caution decreased as the desire to experiment increased. Ademar started promoting ketamine, believing it could expand consciousness. He had already used injectable steroids, so trying this new chemical was easy for him. He introduced ketamine to Gija, who investigators say was under his control. She quickly became involved, and Closamar, who had participated in earlier experiments, joined in without hesitation. The substance soon became a regular part of their lives. At first, ketamine was taken in small, liquid doses. After that, they began using ketamine in a more organized and regular way. Soon, they had vials and other supplies at home. Gija and her family started giving the banned substance on a regular schedule and in a controlled environment. They injected it in a particular order, with each injection having a specific purpose. Over time, they developed rituals around these sessions, involving close friends and some of the salon employees. An anesthetic, previously used in medicine and veterinary practices, was being obtained illegally for personal use. There was a plan, discussed by Ademar, Closamar, and others, to open a veterinary clinic, possibly to make obtaining the banned substance seem legitimate. Investigators later implicated employees of an existing veterinary clinic, alleging that the family obtained the substance through them. As regular use became the norm, the dynamic within the family shifted. Decisions were made in an increasingly insular environment, and any attempt to intervene from the outside was viewed as a threat. Daily routines, conversations, and long-term goals began revolving entirely around the substance. People who once lived socially active lives were now completely absorbed in a lifestyle dictated by dependency, masked as spiritual or ideological growth. What began as a seemingly harmless desire to improve physical appearance progressed through anabolic experiments and culminated in frequent ketamine use. Each person became involved gradually, but with each passing day, the involvement deepened. Chemistry became a daily fixture, and the focus shifted from controlling the body to the illusion of controlling the mind. In the summer of 2023, 82-year-old Maria Vanina, mother of Closamar Cardoso and grandmother of Gija, passed away in the city of Parintins in the state of Amazonas. Her death occurred during the traditional Boi Bumba festival. At the time, Closamar, Ademar, and Gija were all in town, staying at Maria's home. The elderly woman had been in fragile condition for a while, with age, chronic health conditions, and prolonged emotional distress all taking a toll on her well-being. At the time of the tragedy, only 3 people were in the house. Other relatives who had previously lived with Maria Vanina were reportedly asked to leave so they wouldn't interfere with a healing ritual that Closamar intended to perform in a small, private setting. During this ritual, the elderly woman was given injectable substances previously used within the family. Preliminary findings suggest these were the same anabolic compounds that had been introduced earlier. The procedure was presented as a method to restore life energy. The participants believed that the combination of these substances with specific actions could improve one's condition or even lead to full recovery. However, during the session, Maria Vanina lost consciousness, and her condition deteriorated rapidly. No medical help was called. Everything unfolded behind closed doors, without doctors or outside witnesses. According to relatives later interviewed by police, Closamar claimed she had the ability to bring her mother back through prayer and intense spiritual focus. Even after the burial, Closamar insisted that a return was still possible, allegedly through invoking higher powers. These claims deeply concerned family members, but at that time, there were no formal grounds for legal action. The death had been recorded as natural. This event marked the first known episode. It was during this time that elements of what would later become the Pi May Vita group began to emerge within this circle. Closamar assumed a leadership role. Her word became final, not just in spiritual matters, but in decisions that directly affected the lives of others. Later, family members suggested that Maria Vanina's passing might have been caused by the substances administered to her. However, there was no supporting evidence at the time, and the case was not pursued legally. An official investigation was launched only a year later, following Gigia's death, when authorities began connecting the dots between the two incidents and examining the family's internal dynamics. This earlier episode had gone unnoticed by both law enforcement and the public until the larger picture came to light. It became clear that the grandmother's passing wasn't just a tragic accident, but potentially the first consequence of a belief system that blurred the lines between spiritual rhetoric and a dangerous disconnection from reality. Gigia Cardoso's beauty salon chain had maintained a strong reputation right up until the very end. Clients came in, employees worked their shifts, and social media posts kept up the illusion of normality with polished photos and videos. However, some of the employees were not merely observers, they were active participants. One of the key witnesses was makeup artist Claudiel Santos da Silva. She was later placed under house arrest with an electronic monitor because she had a young daughter under her care. Claudiel stated that she had visited Gigia's home multiple times and witnessed her in extremely poor condition, unable to walk, barely responsive, and severely physically weakened. Trying to help, Claudiel washed and styled her hair but didn't go further, fearing she might lose her job. The investigation showed that Closamar and Ademar were in charge of both the rituals and the company's operations. Employees relied on them for everything: schedules, paychecks, client work, and even keeping their jobs depended on being loyal. Disagreeing with them could lead to getting fired. The salons appeared normal and operated until the end of May 2024. Clients were unaware of any issues, appointments were honored, and everything seemed fine. However, some rooms were secretly used for sessions involving controlled substances, orchestrated by the same people who led the rituals. Some staff were invited to participate in these sessions, presented as energy practices. While refusing wasn't directly penalized, it often resulted in decreased trust and fewer opportunities for the employee. Investigators determined that the salons were part of a larger network used to exert influence. They were not only providing money to a select few, but also became instruments for control, creating reliance. Police interviews with employees who were not part of the rituals revealed that many suspected something strange was happening. One employee stated that everyone sensed something was wrong, but they were too afraid to inquire. Emotional manipulation, unwritten rules, and the group's secretive nature fostered an environment of silence. The investigation revealed that a cult, disguised as a legitimate business, had taken root within the salon. It had transformed from a regular salon into an environment where customers became both chemically and emotionally dependent. Following Gigia's death, her ex-partner, Bruno, claimed to be uninvolved. However, he had a tattoo that read Pi Mine Vita, a motto used by the cult and tattooed on other members. This tattoo suggested that he shared the cult's beliefs, even if he didn't actively participate in their practices. Bruno said he tried to stop Gigia the night she died, but she wouldn't listen. He claimed he stayed with her because he cared about her. However, because Gigia was clearly not in a state to make sound judgments, his explanation seemed like he was trying to avoid blame. Gigia's car also raised questions. After she died, Bruno used the car, supposedly to go to the funeral. But instead, he left it on a street. Investigators tracked the car and wondered why he abandoned it without saying anything. Bruno said it had mechanical problems, but this seemed suspicious, possibly an attempt to get rid of evidence or divert attention. Bruno's lawyers claimed he didn't know the full extent of the group's actions. But his phone records showed he frequently contacted Ademar and Hades Marais Silveira. Bruno also visited the Ademar home often, including during gatherings that were later identified as ritual sessions involving illegal banned substances. A lead investigator stated, Bruno had to know what was going on in that house. He was there consistently during important events, even if he wasn't an organizer. Significantly, he stayed overnight the day Gigi died. Bruno and Jesus Moraes Silveira were arrested on June 7 and charged with making false statements. Investigators found that their statements didn't match digital evidence like text messages, location data, and information from their devices. These inconsistencies led to their questioning and temporary arrest. After Gigi's death, the civil police of Amazonas initially investigated the cause. However, the investigation quickly grew as a large amount of evidence revealed a criminal scheme involving a cult, illegal medical practices, and banned substance trafficking. Key people were arrested, and the underlying structure of the operation began to be exposed. The suspects were aware they were being watched before their arrest. When the police came to make the arrests, it was obvious someone was planning to leave. Bags were packed, electronic devices were off, and important papers were gone. But the police moved quickly and caught the suspects before they could escape. Those arrested included beauty salon workers who police believe helped organize the rituals and give out ketamine. They are charged with illegal possession and distribution of banned substance, being part of a criminal group, and performing illegal rituals. A investigação foco principalmente na origem do fornecimento de ketamine. When it was automatically explained that the main predecessor had been a veterinarian in Manaus, José Máximo Silva de Oliveira. According to investigators, the clinic not only distributed ketamine without proper veterinary prescriptions but also stored other controlled substances. During the search, documents were seized confirming an ongoing relationship between the clinic and the Cardoso family. The beauty salons were used to finance and support illegal activities. Investigators described this as part of a larger scheme, where a legitimate business, religious rhetoric, and the illegal trade of substances were interwoven into a single structure that controlled both money and people. Further confirmation of the scale and organization came with the arrest of 2 staff members from the same veterinary clinic. One was suspected of actively supplying substances to group members, while the other was believed to have destroyed records and concealed evidence. The operation functioned on 3 levels: consumers, the Cardoso family and close associates, intermediaries, Aus Silveira and salon staff, and suppliers, the veterinary clinic. Based on this structure, police formally classified the network as a criminal organization. Investigators also examined the group's public image, finding that their spiritual movement was a facade, not a true belief. The Gigi case then transformed from a personal tragedy into a major criminal investigation, revealing a large, organized network disguised as a spiritual community. Police stated that the organization had been operating for years, successfully evading detection while portraying itself as a legitimate and respected business. A year before Gigi's death, in June 2023, Amazonas law enforcement had started preliminary monitoring of the group, Pai, May, Vida. However, it was only after Gigi's death that the investigation began to focus on the group's involvement with banned substance. In December 2024, a court in Manaus reached a verdict in a banned substance-related case. The court rejected the defense's argument that the use of substances was voluntary and part of a personal spiritual search. The judge ruled that the case involved systemic exploitation, manipulation, and abuse of trust under the guise of spiritual practice. This ruling marked the conclusion of the main phase of the investigation, but it also raised lingering questions. Were there additional participants who slipped under the radar? And could similar groups be operating in other cities under the appearance of spiritual or self-help movements? After investigation, the individuals reported by the prosecutor's office and the charges they face are as follows. Closamar Cardoso Rodriguez, Gigi's mother, charged with banned substance trafficking and conspiracy to commit banned substance trafficking, arrested. Ademar Farias Cardoso Neto, Gigi's brother, charged with banned substance trafficking and conspiracy to commit banned substance trafficking, arrested. José Máximo Silva de Oliveira, owner of a veterinary clinic that supplied ketamine, charged with banned substance trafficking and conspiracy to commit banned substance trafficking, arrested. Savio Soares Pereira, José Máximo's partner in the veterinary clinic, charged with banned substance trafficking and conspiracy to commit banned substance trafficking, arrested. Jesus Moraes Silveira, a coach who posed as Gigi's family's personal trainer, charged with banned substance trafficking and conspiracy to commit banned substance trafficking arrested. Marlison Vasconcelos Dantas, a hairdresser in a chain of beauty salons owned by Gigi's family, charged with banned substance trafficking under house arrest. Even after the high-profile trial concluded, the case of Gigi Cardoso remained in the public spotlight. A cloud of pressure and distrust lingered over those previously associated with the family, especially individuals believed to have had direct ties to the group. One of the most difficult outcomes affected Claudio Santos da Silva, who was among those detained during the initial wave of arrests. She was released on supervised terms as she had a young daughter under her care. However, following her arrest, the child's father took custody and refused to return her, claiming Claudio posed a potential risk. This led to a legal battle with she fighting to regain parental rights. The case was further complicated by unresolved allegations involving the use of prohibited substances. The public reacted with shock. Online discussions continued to express disbelief that a structure resembling a spiritual cult could operate inside a family home, violating both legal and moral boundaries. In response, authorities in the state of Amazonas launched inquiries into other establishments that may have used psychoactive substances under the guise of therapy or spiritual awakening. Today, we will discuss the tragic case of Jennifer and Brandon Sheffield. They initially met through mutual friends in their Mississippi community. According to their friend, Faye Lott, a childhood acquaintance, their relationship started as a promising love story. Faye remembers their first meeting and noticed Brandon's obvious affection for Jennifer. His devotion led many to believe they were witnessing the beginning of something truly special. Jennifer is also attracted to Brandon's strong family values and charming nature. Jennifer, born on September 9, 1994, spent her childhood in Mississippi with her parents, Eileen and Gilbert Murillo, and her younger brother, Austin Murillo. Her upbringing greatly influenced her compassionate and dedicated character. Faye remembers Jennifer's love for animals, recalling how she enjoyed horseback riding and catching turtles, typical pastimes for a child growing up in the countryside. As Jennifer grew older, her natural beauty and warm personality became more and more apparent. Faye noted, she blossomed into the most beautiful young woman. She was absolutely stunning without even trying. However, Jennifer's beauty was more than skin deep. She was also known for her kindness and selflessness, which endeared her to everyone she met. Brandon Sheffield was born on September 22, 1984, in Mobile, Alabama, making him 10 years older than Jennifer. He valued family above all else, was described as someone with intense connections and a radiant spirit. Brandon had a passion for Alabama football and was known as a great brother and uncle to his family. Brandon loved working on cars, fishing, playing disc golf, and going on family trips. Jennifer admired Brandon's commitment to his family and his desire to create a lasting relationship with him. They connected easily, naturally. As their relationship developed, Jennifer continued to pursue her educational goals with unwavering determination. She was deeply committed to her faith and had a profound love for God that guided her decisions and shaped her worldview. Jennifer poured herself completely into everything she did, whether it was her relationships, her studies, or her future career aspirations. Jennifer and Brandon's relationship progressed to marriage. They welcomed two beautiful daughters, Kylie and Gracie Sheffield. Jennifer embraced motherhood with the same dedication and love she brought to every aspect of her life. Her daughters became the center of their world, and Brandon was described as a devoted father who cherished Kylie and Gracie. They were truly his world. The early years of their marriage seemed filled with hope and promise. Jennifer relentlessly pursued her dream of becoming a doctor. After earning a Bachelor of Science degree in biochemistry, she enrolled in the Masters of Medical Sciences program at Mississippi College and obtained a Master of Science degree in biology medical science. She balanced the demanding coursework with her responsibilities as a mother. Jennifer's motivation stemmed from a strong desire to help others through a career in healthcare. Dr. Stan Baldwin, Dean of the School of Science and Mathematics and Jennifer's academic advisor, praised her as exceptionally bright, enthusiastic about learning, and a positive influence. Her dedication to her studies mirrored her approach to life. Jennifer's commitment was an inspiration, and her goal of helping people through medicine appeared achievable. Jennifer's life was full and meaningful. Above all else, she loved her career, her children, and her faith. These connections show that Jennifer found support and encouragement throughout her life. In the early years of their marriage, Brandon seemed supportive of Jennifer's ambitions. They appeared to be a perfect match to those around them. Jennifer's strong faith was clear to everyone. Brandon seemed to respect her values and commitment to family. Jennifer approached every part of her life with great energy and devotion. People who knew her described her as loving, caring, silly, devoted, and selfless. Her caring nature and desire to make a positive impact made her loved by family, friends, and academic communities. Brandon and Jennifer enjoyed raising their family together, creating happy memories on family vacations. They seemed like a strong, loving unit. However, over time, their marriage began to show signs of strain. Jennifer noticed concerning changes in their relationship, though she didn't fully grasp their importance at the time. The pressures of everyday life were taking a toll on their marriage. Jennifer, a mother of two, struggled to manage her difficult schoolwork while supporting her family. The cost of living and studying put a strain on their finances, which may have caused problems in her marriage. Jennifer focused on her studies and her religion. Jennifer's intelligence and commitment to her medical career could have made Brandon feel like he was no longer an equal partner. Jennifer remained dedicated to her goals, but this commitment may have strained her marriage. Her master's program and motherhood duties left her with little time to focus on her relationship with Brandon. Those close to them said they never saw any violence or aggression from Brandon. The finances likely added to their stress. It was probably hard to support a family while Jennifer was in school, and this financial strain could have made existing problems worse. As Jennifer excelled in her studies and received praise, the difference between her accomplishments and Brandon's feelings about his own life probably grew larger. This imbalance in their relationship could have caused Brandon to feel resentful and inadequate, especially if these feelings were ignored. Jennifer, concentrating on her ambitions, may not have realized how her success was affecting Brandon's self-esteem. Ironically, the qualities that made Jennifer special, her intelligence, determination, and caring nature, might have unintentionally worsened the issues in their marriage. Near the end of 2024, Jennifer and Brandon decided to divorce. They both felt their marriage could not be saved. Jennifer handled the difficult situation with her usual poise and maturity. Sources say they had started the divorce process and were trying to separate peacefully. Jennifer was saddened by the decision but was committed to handling the divorce respectfully and ensuring their daughter's needs came first. Reports indicate Brandon may have initiated divorce proceedings around Thanksgiving 2024. This detail would later become crucial in understanding the subsequent tragic events. Jennifer felt anxious about the upcoming changes. Having never lived independently, she felt both determined and worried about managing single parenthood alongside her studies. Even though it was emotionally challenging, Jennifer was determined to stay on good terms with Brandon for their daughter's benefit. Her attitude toward the divorce showed her true nature. She wanted the best for Kylie and Gracie, ensuring they could still have a relationship with both her and Brandon. The divorce seemed to be going well at first. Jennifer and Brandon were reportedly cooperating to divide their property and decide on custody arrangements. Unfortunately, Jennifer's belief that Brandon would continue to cooperate turned out to be wrong. During the divorce, Jennifer mainly wanted to protect her daughters and make the transition easier for them. She was dedicated to working with Brandon as co-parents to lessen any negative effects on Kylie and Gracie. The thought of supporting herself and her daughters with little money was scary. Still, she hoped that she and Brandon could cooperate to provide for their children. On December 10, 2024, Jennifer shared a TikTok video with her 15,000 followers, expressing hope about how Brandon was managing their divorce. In the video, filmed while driving in Mississippi, Jennifer said she was about to become a single mom. She complimented Brandon, saying he was being incredible and that they were working together well. She stated they were splitting everything fairly and having a civil divorce focused on their daughter. Jennifer's video conveyed her appreciation for Brandon's cooperation and her positive outlook on the separation. The video also addressed Jennifer's financial concerns about becoming a single mother. She explained that while her child's father would provide support, she would now be a single-income household. Jennifer expressed gratitude for the financial assistance, acknowledging it would ease some of her worries. However, she also admitted to feeling anxious about managing a limited income while buying a new house and paying a mortgage. Her vulnerability was evident as she confessed to feeling scared and uncertain about being on her own for the first time. Jennifer openly asked for advice from viewers with experience in similar situations, highlighting her desire for guidance and her commitment to navigating her new life. Jennifer and others didn't realize that Brandon was hiding his true feelings. Although he appeared to be cooperating with the divorce, he was becoming increasingly angry. The divorce, which Jennifer described as friendly, was actually a sign of a dangerous situation that would soon turn tragic. Jennifer believed the divorce was going smoothly, but Brandon was struggling much more than anyone knew. He reportedly became possessive after finding out Jennifer was talking to someone new. The idea of Jennifer moving on and starting a new relationship was too much for him to handle. Even though Brandon had started the divorce, Jennifer's freedom and the possibility of her being with someone else deeply upset him. Jennifer believed Brandon was being reasonable and didn't realize the anger and despair he was hiding. She went about her life as usual, studying and taking care of their daughters, unaware of the increasing threat. Jennifer was optimistic about her future, not realizing Brandon's support was insincere. She concentrated on her path to becoming a doctor, thinking they were effectively raising their child together. Throughout December, Jennifer juggled her studies and motherhood, determined to achieve her goals despite the difficulties of the divorce. She maintained a positive attitude, convinced they were cooperating for their child's sake. The days leading up to Christmas appeared normal. Jennifer shared updates on her TikTok account, documenting her life as a mother and student in Mississippi. To her followers and friends, she seemed to be handling life's changes with remarkable strength and grace, projecting an image of resilience and optimism, even as she privately struggled with the uncertainties of her future. The difference between Jennifer's positive TikTok video and her death just 18 days later shows how well Brandon hid his true plans. He seemed cooperative but may have been secretly planning something terrible, suggesting he was calculating. This makes the tragedy even more unsettling. Afterward, Brandon's friends and family were shocked, saying they never saw him act violently. On December 27, 2024, Jennifer's family became worried when they couldn't get in touch with her. Jennifer usually stayed in close contact with her family, so as the hours passed without a word, their worry intensified. They feared something might be wrong. Because they were so concerned, the family decided to check on her at her home on Tulone Street, Mississippi, where she lived with Brandon and their daughters. On December 28, 2024, at approximately 7:19 a.m., Jennifer's family arrived at the house and saw clear indications of a break-in. They were so alarmed by the scene that they immediately called the police department, realizing something terrible had happened. The family recognized evidence of a violent crime and understood the situation required immediate law enforcement intervention. Their worst fears were about to be confirmed. The police officers swiftly responded to a call at a Tulone Street home, anticipating a serious crime. Though experienced, they were shocked by what they found inside, a scene of domestic violence that had tragically escalated. Upon arriving at the scene, officers discovered the bodies of Jennifer Sheffield, 30, and Brandon Sheffield, 40, who had both died from multiple gunshot wounds. The Mississippi Bureau of Investigation's crime scene unit immediately began assisting with the investigation by processing the scene. Despite initial impressions, Chief French stressed that the case remained an active investigation, ensuring all details would be carefully considered. Crime scene investigators meticulously collected evidence at the Sheffield's home, hoping to understand what happened. They systematically documented the scene, taking photos, collecting samples, and gathering relevant physical items. Investigators carefully recorded the positions of the bodies and the location of all evidence to reconstruct the sequence of events. The initial investigation indicated that this was a murder taking his own life, with Brandon as the one who committed the acts. And one of Jennifer and Brandon's daughters was in the house when the crime happened. The investigator covered the crime scene and the well-being of the children, who were now orphans. Following the tragedy, Brandon's brother Brian set up a GoFundMe campaign to provide financial support for Kylie and Gracie. Jennifer and Brandon Sheffield's joint funeral service took place on January 5, 2025, at Ott and Lee Funeral Home in Brandon, Mississippi. The case of Jennifer and Brandon Sheffield is a poignant reminder of the dangers that lurk in seemingly stable relationships. Jennifer, with her love for her children, her desire to become a doctor, and her strong faith, lived an inspiring life, leaving a mark on her family, friends, and community. However, Brandon's unresolved stress and hidden emotions led to a tragic end, taking both their lives and leaving Kylie and Gracie orphans. While Brian's fundraising campaign and the outpouring of support from the Brandon, Mississippi, community have not been able to undo the loss, they have found hope. This tragedy reminds us of the importance of recognizing and intervening early on when signs of family dysfunction are present to prevent similar pain in the future. Love is a wonderful feeling that inspires books, music, and films. However, if it's a perverted love, held by a sick individual, it can be devastating, shattering many lives. Similarly, wealth can easily corrupt, causing a person to lose self-control. When feelings are added to this volatile mix, the outcome is rarely positive. Dion Andrea Bao, an immigrant from Jamaica, possessed a striking beauty. She planned to attend college in Atlanta, USA, focusing on finance. She moved to America with her husband, also a Jamaican native, named Sean Nelson, a Jamaica Airlines pilot. They met in Miami nightclub in 1988. Dion was always drawn to wealth. In the 1982nd and 92nd, being a pilot was a prestigious position. They earned a good income and could afford a comfortable lifestyle. However, Sean's job had its downsides. He spent little time at home. 2 years into the relationship, they decided to move to Georgia. Sean was content with his job and life. Dion worked as a secretary at a large company while continuing her education and becoming other. Despite Sean's prestigious and well-paid job, disagreements began to surface. Dion felt he lacked ambition and had no prospects for advancement, which frustrated her. Dion believed he should continue to develop professionally. She pushed him to change careers and go into business, suggesting that her financial education could help them create a family company. She also hoped this would keep him home more. He resisted, so Dion decided to take matters into her own hands. Then, Sean's frequent absences now worked to her advantage. Instead of devoting her free time to her baby, Dion began searching for a man who could offer her a better lifestyle. In April 1996, Dion, working as a secretary, had access to the office mail. One day, she saw an invitation to an exclusive party for wealthy individuals. She recognized this as a chance to meet wealthy and influential people, hoping it would help her achieve her desire for wealth and luxury. Dion asked her boss about the invitation. He explained it was a birthday party for Lance Herndon, a tech mogul. Naturally, Dion was very interested in attending. Initially, her boss was hesitant because she didn't know anyone there. However, impressed by her ambition and confidence, he thought her presence would be well received. Dion's manager learned that another employee had also received an invitation, but didn't plan to go. He convinced that employee to pass the invitation to Dion. She had gotten her way and could now attend a privileged party for the upper crust of society. By this point, she had little interest in her husband and child, wanting only to gain access to U.S. high society and become rich and famous. Lance Herndon's 41st birthday was a golden opportunity for the young woman. He was a well-known Atlanta multimillionaire who made his fortune in the technology business. He owned a company called Access, Inc., focused on integrating high technology into the city's 911 emergency service program. He aimed to expand it. With a deep understanding of computers and advanced solutions, during his career, Lance was recognized as one of the 500 best entrepreneurs in the United States. He even met with President Bill Clinton, who praised his work. Lance was a hard worker, a trait instilled in him by his paternal grandfather, who taught him to wake up early and work efficiently. He had 3 alarm clocks in his bedroom, set for 3:40 a.m., 3:50 a.m., and 4 o'clock a.m. Upon waking, he immediately began his workday, delegating tasks to his employees. His house was in the same building as his company's offices. He lived on the first floor, which had a separate entrance, while the rest of the employees worked on the upper floors. Waking up at 4 o'clock a.m., Lance would go to his office upstairs and write messages for the employees who would arrive later. He provided them with instructions, laying them out at their workstations so they knew what to do upon arrival. People willingly worked at his company for many years and were well compensated. Everyone saw in Lance a reasonable and sensitive leader, focused on success. Thanks to his meticulousness and love for his business, he achieved everything one could only dream of. The company flourished in the 90s, and Atlanta became a hub of social life, with Lance becoming a prominent figure, working from Monday to Friday. He didn't forget about rest. On weekends, he often threw private parties. In addition to success and fame, he had weaknesses. His main vice was beautiful women. However, he wasn't conventionally attractive. A short man with a simple appearance, he didn't attract many women in his youth. But when he became wealthy, many women pursued him. By this point, he had been married 3 times. Shortly before the party Dion wanted to attend, he got divorced again. To those close to him, the reason for this breakup was no secret: his infidelity. Women loved him. He was famous, rich, and generous with gifts. He spent thousands of dollars on his mistresses every week, even more than he gave to his wife. She grew tired of enduring his infidelity. So, when the position of Lance Herndon's wife became vacant once again in 1996, the competition was fierce. However, being the next Mrs. Herndon wasn't so pleasant. In fact, 2 of Lance's wives couldn't even stay in the relationship until their first anniversary. Lance quickly lost interest in his lovers, after which he usually offered them money and ended the relationship. Back to 1990. Janine Price became Lance's next wife. Many in the man's circle believed she was the most worthy partner for him. Immediately after their marriage, they began working on their dream home, a 6,000 square meter mansion. Most of their neighbors were wealthy individuals, and construction was underway in a prestigious area in the Roswell suburb of Atlanta. During the same period, the first disagreements appeared. Janine didn't like her husband's approach to business. Even the fact that he left notes for his employees early in the morning, and then went off to do his own thing and practically didn't contact anyone. She considered it selfish. Lance himself was sure that direct communication with ordinary workers was a waste of time. Law of repetition. Lance lost interest in Janine pretty quickly. By this time, Janine was already pregnant with their future son. She noticed that Lance's interest faded. He practically stopped communicating with her, and soon she found out that he was dating and even sleeping with others. For some time, she endured all this, hoping to save the family, expecting that her husband would show interest in her again. But by the time their child was born, she could no longer stand his behavior. Janine decided to break up because of numerous betrayals. So, by his 41st birthday, Lance Herndon was again on the market. Having received an invitation to a party, Dion began to prepare carefully. In April 1996, she found herself at a private party organized by multimillionaire Lance Herndon. She chose the best outfit, did stunning makeup, and styled her hair. There were more than 400 people gathered there, all of them representatives of the privileged community of Atlanta. Despite the fact that Dion didn't know anyone there, she looked so amazing. However, She wasn't interested in these people. She wanted the main attraction, Lance. At this time, Lance didn't communicate much with the guests who came. He usually took a place in the corner of the rented room with a large table and a sofa, sat, and talked with women. He had a habit of keeping a piece of paper on which each woman could write her name and phone number. This piece of paper was never empty. At some point during the evening, Lance found himself drawn to a petite woman with captivating brown eyes, who seemed to be watching him. It was Dion. Despite not being invited, and knowing no one else at the party, she somehow managed to capture the attention of the host himself. In the midst of the celebration, Lance approached her, introduced himself as Lance Herndon, and struck up a conversation. They spent the rest of the evening together, chatting amiably. He obtained Dion's phone number, and from the very next day, their relationship began to blossom. Lance frequently told his inner circle that he had finally met the most stunning woman in Atlanta. This wasn't entirely new behavior. He typically showered his new lovers with both compliments and extravagant gifts. Within a couple of weeks, a brand new luxury Mercedes appeared in Dion's driveway. She had completely charmed him. He seemed to have lost his head. She willingly accepted any amount of money he offered, to the point where he even gave her his credit card. During this period, Dion was still married. However, her husband and son quickly became secondary in her life. Shaun, returning from yet another flight, was understandably surprised to see his wife driving such an expensive car. When he inquired about it, Dion explained that she had a new business coach who was mentoring her. Dion laughed at his old used car and occasionally allowed he to drive her new car. Although Dion was not yet ready to leave her husband, she certainly couldn't give up her newfound luxurious lifestyle, especially since her husband, being a pilot, I was away for weeks at a time, leaving her with ample opportunity to spend time with Lance. Her husband found her excuse somewhat convincing. The car did not arouse much suspicion, but returning from another flight, he found out that his wife had moved to a new big house. In response to his questions, she said that she had been saving money for a long time. Of course, it was a lie. Shaun suspected deception and demanded proof of her alleged savings. But Dion simply avoided the question. Now, he really doubted this, so he decided to take his child back to his family in Jamaica. Little did he know that this was exactly what Dion wanted. She could now freely devote all of her time to Lance, hoping to become the next Mrs. Herndon. It remains unclear whether she ever told Lance about her husband and child. Regardless, he willingly entered into a serious relationship with her. Soon, he had a pretty secretary with a Jamaican accent who would rush to his office at a moment's notice in a gifted car. However, Dion wasn't the only one engaged in deception. Lance, too, was a deceiver. His accountant was his own mother, a fact that was far from coincidental. He needed someone he could trust implicitly to keep the true state of his company a secret. The harsh reality was that his accounts were nearly empty. He was broke due to his exorbitant spending on parties and women. His credit cards were tens of thousands of dollars in debt, but he couldn't bring himself to stop and adopt a more modest lifestyle. Lance's mother was fully aware of the situation but kept it a secret. Her primary concern was to ensure that taxes were paid and that the staff received their salaries on time, so that no one would suspect a thing. Approximately 2 months into his relationship with Dion, Lance's total debts reached almost $500,000. The lovers' relationship had developed rapidly, but then things began to follow his usual pattern. Sometime after they met, Lance began to lose interest. During this period, he spent between $20,000 and $40,000 each month on his mistress. She quickly became addicted to the wealthy life, filling her wardrobe exclusively with designer clothes and even refusing to wear the same outfits twice. Lance did not want to tell her the truth. According to his standard scenario, he gradually began to limit communication, assuming that everything would soon come to naught. Dion, however, proved to be far more persistent than the American women Lance was accustomed to dealing with. Despite his persistent ignoring of her calls, Dion began seeking out opportunities to meet him. Now, instead of money. He offered her only excuses. This was easy for him, as he had a cheat sheet with a list of the most beautiful women in Atlanta. For Dion, all this was a big blow. Now Dion's replacement is Kathy Collins, whom Lance met in Los Angeles in 1989. They kept in touch regularly over the years, but Kathy doesn't seem particularly attractive, at least not enough to be his fourth wife. Nevertheless, her photo took up space on his nightstand. During this same period, he was also communicating with Talana Caraway, an employee of his company, whom he paid personally for small administrative tasks. Not realizing the true scale of what was happening, Dion continued her desperate attempts to establish contact. But she was already considered written off like all the other young women. She kept calling and became increasingly aggressive. It became obvious that she wouldn't take no for an answer. Now, Lance described her to his friends as a real hysteric who behaved inappropriately, but Dion could no longer back down. She had received so much money from him that she was overcome with greed and couldn't stop. On July 10, 1996, she put on her best outfit and perfect makeup, ensure that Lance wouldn't be able to refuse her and that she would receive a lot of money again. Late in the evening, she went to his house, but before she reached the door, she noticed another woman inside. The plan suddenly failed. Furious, she ran to the door and began banging on it, screaming hysterically. Instead of going out to her, Lance claimed he didn't know who she was and called the police. When the patrol cars arrived, Dion was still hysterical. She was even more enraged that Lance was acting as if he didn't know her at all. She claimed that she had been dating him for months and that he paid all her bills. But because of her behavior, no one listened to her. Lance was also furious. He blocked the credit card he had given to Dion, and a statement was made about an attempted break-in, meaning Dion could end up behind bars. Naturally, this made her even angrier. In August, the situation began to escalate. A trial was coming, which could send Dion to prison, something she couldn't allow. Lance completely cut off her financial support. Finally, Dion was on the verge of divorce from her husband. Lance continued his exorbitant spending and met a new girl, spending time with her. On August 8, 1996, he attended a celebration dedicated to the Olympic Games, then picked up his 92-year-old grandmother from the airport. His ex-wife Janine decided to help with his grandmother. Then, he met Talana Caraway. They had already had several dates, and Lance wanted to get to know her better. Talana left the office at 10:37 p.m., and when she came home at 11 o'clock p.m., she received a message from Lance. Talana called him. They laughed together, chatted for a few minutes, and both went to bed. The next morning, the 9th of August, at around 8 o'clock a.m., the company employees arrived for work. However, this day was unlike any other. The usual instructions Lance, their manager, left were missing. This was very strange and uncharacteristic of him, leaving everyone confused and unsure of what to do. The residential area of the building was off-limits to regular employees, so they had to wait for Lance's mother to arrive. She went down to the residential section and screamed. She ran back out and frantically called emergency services, explaining that she had found her son in bed, covered in blood. The operator tried to obtain more details, but the woman was too distraught to speak clearly. The bloody scene had shocked her deeply. When paramedics and law enforcement officers arrived, they confirmed that 41-year-old Lance Herndon was dead. He was lying on his back, with his arms crossed over his chest. An examination revealed he had suffered at least a dozen blows to the face with a blunt object. There were no signs of forced entry. All 3 alarm clocks Lance used were turned off. His wallet and several credit cards were left on the dresser in the bedroom. But the shirt and pants he had worn the night before were missing. In the master bathroom, a bloody pillowcase, likely used to wipe the murder weapon, was found in the toilet. His laptop and an expensive ring were missing near the garage. A chewing gum wrapper was also found. Lance's mother noticed a crucial detail: a photo of Kathy, his longtime girlfriend, which he usually kept on his nightstand. was turned face down. The medical examiner determined the murder took place between 2:00 a.m. and 4:00 a.m., and that an adjustable wrench, recently used by Lance, had been used as the murder weapon and was now missing. The tool had been lying in a visible place, easily accessible. Considering Lance's promiscuous lifestyle, the murder appeared to be a crime of passion. The police immediately began questioning relatives, searching for anyone who had recently behaved aggressively towards Lance or seemed to be stalking him. One of the prime suspects was Janine, his ex-wife. She had a $1 million life insurance policy on Lance and was the sole beneficiary. However, she appeared to have no strong financial motive. Despite the substantial payout, Lance had continued to financially support her and their son, paying thousands of dollars monthly until their son turned 18. This amount would exceed the lump sum of $1 million, so he was more valuable alive. Furthermore, Janine willingly cooperated with law enforcement and did not arouse suspicion. Kathy was with another man that night. Her alibi was confirmed, as was Talana's. Investigators continued to pursue other leads. There were plenty of them. A public funeral was held. Lance was buried in a closed casket because his face was too disfigured to be restored. Then, the most shocking information came to light. There was no money in the company's account. It turned out that Lance and his mother had been struggling for years to stay afloat. They immediately spent any income to pay off debts and employee salaries, concealing their financial struggles. After Lance's death, his relatives faced an almost unbearable debt burden of around $1 million. To pay off at least some of the debt, including unpaid salaries and taxes, they began selling off property, mostly below market value. This allowed them to significantly reduce the debt. Meanwhile, detectives continued their search for the killer. 18 months passed without any leads, and the investigation stalled. The situation changed when Sean Nelson arrived at the police station. He was in the process of divorcing Dion, and after a recent argument with his wife, he contacted the police. During that argument, Dion allegedly threatened him, saying in a fit of anger that she would kill him just as she had done with Lance Herndon. Sean further claimed that Dion admitted to being in Lance Herndon's house on the night of the murder. At the time, divorce proceedings were already underway. When the name of Lance surfaced in court, Dion lied, stating they were just friends. However, investigators found her current testimony contradicted her initial testimony immediately following Lance's death. Furthermore, Dion will have a trial for attempting to break into Lance's house. Investigators began to wonder if Dion had killed Lance to prevent him from testifying against her. The police wanted to talk to Dion and went to her house. When no one answered the door, they asked her neighbors if they knew where she was. But they didn't. The investigators left the scene and returned to the station. Shortly after the police departed, Dion returned to the neighbor's house and inquired about the police visit. Dion claimed she was taking a shower when the police arrived. But the neighbor was skeptical. Observing that Dion's hair was dry and she was wearing makeup, Dion then got into her car and drove away. The neighbor contacted the police and reported Dion's departure. Police officers then returned to Dion's house to wait for her return. About 20 minutes later, Dion arrived home. She then became hysterical upon learning of Lance's death. However, the police found her reaction unconvincing. She was invited to the station for questioning, where she mentioned that Lance's laptop was with her. She explained that Lance himself had brought it to her home shortly before the murder. This claim contradicted the established timeline of events. Moreover, Lance's employees stated that he would never have taken his laptop out of the office, as he constantly needed it for work, and certainly not without its case, which was later found in Dion's storage room. On January 29, 1998, police arrested Dion Baugh and charged her with the murder of Lance Herndon. Released on $150,000 bail, prosecutors spent time building their case against her. Among the evidence presented when the case finally went to trial in 2001 was the fact that on the day Lance Herndon was found dead, Dion had purchased $3,000 worth of furniture with one of Lance's credit cards. She also had his expensive laptop, which his associates said he never left with him. Among the state's witnesses was Detective William E. Anastasio, who recalled what others had said about Dion, painting a picture of her as a promiscuous gold digger, a claim her defense team vehemently disputed. After 6 hours and 20 minutes of deliberation, a jury convicted Dion Baugh of first-degree murder for the murder of Lance Herndon and sentenced her to life in prison. However, 2 years later, the Georgia Supreme Court overturned the conviction, finding that Detective Anastasio's testimony had prejudiced the jury. Dion Baugh's second trial for the murder of Lance Herndon ended in a mistrial after the jury failed to reach a consensus. She was released on $500,000 bail, rather than risk a third trial, which could have resulted in a reinstatement of her life sentence. Dion pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter in November 2004. She agreed to serve 10 years in prison, followed by 10 years of probation upon her release. Dion Baugh was released from prison in November 2011 at the age of 44. Her ex-husband and children still live in Jamaica. On the morning of November 6, 2012, people on their way to work found the body of a young woman on 18th Avenue in Quezon City. She was wearing a white top and blue leggings. She had no shoes or purse or identification with her. Her eyes were open in a fearful expression. Then, police officers arrived and secured the scene, and a medical examiner was called. It was clear that she had been murdered. She had been shot 5 times in the head and had bruises, scrapes, dark marks on her body, indicating severe trauma. Injuries to her pelvic area suggested she may have been abused. She had no personal belongings except for a McDonald's paper bag in her hand. Detectives also found a McDonald's receipt nearby. While law enforcement tried to identify the victim, neighbors began giving their accounts. Some reported hearing gunshots around 5 a.m. Others saw a dark SUV speeding away. One witness said someone in the SUV shot at a person already on the ground. 2 other witnesses recalled part of the SUV's license plate number, which became a key detail early in the investigation. Crime scene technicians delayed moving the body to protect evidence. Within hours, the area was crowded with police, onlookers, journalists, and people recording videos. On the 5th of November, Julie Ann Rodriguez, a 20-year-old model, left her family's home in Las Piñas. It wasn't immediately cause for concern because Julie often worked late or spent time with friends. That evening, she told her mother and younger brothers not to wait up for her. Julie was going to meet a close friend, Althea Altamirano, to try and repair their relationship after a recent argument. Althea had invited Julie to meet a potential modeling client, which Julie saw as a good opportunity. Julie dressed carefully in a white top and blue leggings, and put on makeup. Around 6 p.m., she left to meet Althea at the SM Mall of Asia in Pasay. It started as a normal evening. 2 friends watched a movie, chatted, and strolled around. Later, they took a taxi to the World Trade Center, where they were to meet a client there. Around 10:30 p.m., as they walked on Diosdado Macapagal Boulevard, a dark SUV stopped next to them. 2 men jumped out, seized Julie, and shoved her into the SUV very quickly. Althea, who was right beside Julie, was unable to stop them. Julie's purse and shoes were left on the sidewalk as the SUV sped away. Althea was panicked and stayed where she was, clutching Julie's things and sobbing. Police officers saw her distress and stopped to help. They took her to the police station. There, she gave a confused account, saying that Julie had been kidnapped by strangers she didn't recognize. She said the attack was sudden. She barely saw the vehicle, only that it was a big, black SUV. She emphasized that they hadn't tried to take her too. At around 12:40 a.m., after giving her statement, Althea texted her boyfriend asking him to come pick her up. He arrived with his father. and they took her home to Cavite. By the following day, she had stopped answering calls from law enforcement. Later, her relatives claimed that she was afraid for her safety. However, detectives noted several inconsistencies in Althea's story. She failed to mention the prearranged meeting with Julie or the purported professional introduction they were to have. Julie Ann Rodelis was born on July 14, 1992, and raised in Las Piñas, a southern suburb of Metro Manila. Within a modest but close-knit household, she was one of 6 siblings. Her mother, Luz, supported the family by preparing and selling homemade meals. A father figure was absent from their lives. His whereabouts and identity remained unknown, and he played no role in their daily existence. Despite the financial hardships, Julie grew up surrounded by love and support. From a young age, she was focused and responsible. Her decision to study hotel and restaurant management at Arellano University, a private college, was deliberate and driven by her long-term goals. However, the high tuition costs forced her to put her education on hold several times. To help fund her studies, Julie began working part-time. Modeling wasn't a pursuit of fame for her. It was a practical solution to cover her expenses. Her entry into the industry came through a personal connection, which eventually led to commercial shoots and an appearance on the ABS-CBN network. Julie's modeling career began to gain traction. She was featured in photo shoots for well-known men's magazines, including FHM Philippines. Her appearance, work ethic, and professionalism helped her secure steady gigs. She carved a path forward in a highly competitive field, while balancing her studies and modeling career. A significant influence in Julie's modeling career was Althea Altamirano, a friend, 3 years her senior. Althea had also entered the modeling world and, by 2012, had gained a modest level of recognition. She was featured as a Girlfriend of the Month in the September issue of FHM that year. In her social circles, Althea was viewed as ambitious, energetic, and goal-oriented. However, behind the image of success were personal details she kept carefully hidden. She was a mother of 2. She chose not to publicize this, knowing it could undermine her image as a young and unattached professional model. They had known each other for years, and their relationship appeared close from the outside. Julie trusted her deeply. However, things shifted as Julie began gaining more traction in the industry. As her popularity grew, so did the tension between them. In Althea's eyes, Julie had gone from a friend to a rival. At the same time, rumors began spreading among other models that Althea was raising 2 children. Althea suspected that Julie was the one who had shared that information, and she saw it as a betrayal. That moment marked a turning point in their relationship. What started as quiet jealousy gradually turned into resentment and, eventually, into conflict. Though the tension remained unspoken, it hung heavily between them. Althea's growing fear of losing her standing in the industry pushed her toward confiding in her boyfriend. Fernando Quiambao Jr. was 32 years old and owned a tattoo shop in Quezon City. He was known for his aggressive behavior. According to Althea, during one of their arguments, he once pointed a weapon at her. Although she felt threatened, she didn't leave the relationship. It was Fernando who came up with the idea to scare Julie, suggesting it would help her understand who she was dealing with. The plan was to stage a confrontation without letting things go too far. Althea didn't push back on the suggestion. She didn't have a concrete plan, nor did she seem to grasp how serious the situation could become. Althea chose the moment, shared Julie's location, led her to the designated spot, and stood by silently when the incident occurred. None of these actions were impulsive. Right after Julie was kidnapped, she was taken to a house on Leno Street in Salam Compound, Quezon City. Compound is a crowded residential area with mostly Muslim families. The house was being used as a temporary hiding place. Inside, several men associated with Fernando were openly present. The kidnapping was planned in advance, and each person had a specific job, according to court records. The first person to isolate Julie was a man named Efren Talib. He took her into a separate room. Soon after, others in the house heard her yelling and pleading for help. One of the men present, Waraji, later testified that he heard her cries, but chose not to intervene. That's when the aggression escalated physically. Witnesses stated that Efren was the initial aggressor and remained alone with her for an extended period. Evidence later confirmed that she was subjected to both physical assault and an act of aggressive harassment. Later that night, a man named Aldos, described by others as dangerous and unpredictable, arrived at the house. He was not part of the original plan, and his presence was unwanted. Jamer, Aldos, and others were already there. Aldos, armed with a .45 caliber handgun, quickly took control. He ignored objections and announced he would assault Julie before she was taken care of. No one present intervened. Aldos's arrival dramatically escalated the situation. Unlike the others, he didn't treat it as a scare tactic or staged intimidation. His actions made it clear that he never intended to let Julie leave the house alive. Aldos told Julie she was going home as she exited the house. Julie, relieved and optimistic, thanked him, not knowing he was lying. Meanwhile, the others were planning how to get rid of her body. Yamar, realizing the situation was worse than he expected, left. He later became a crucial witness in the investigation. While the remaining people proceeded with their plan, Fernando went to a McDonald's on United Nations Avenue in Manila at 2:03 a.m. He ordered 2 cheeseburger combo meals to take away. He returned to the house and gave 1 meal to Julie. Fernando learns that Aldos and Efren attacked Julie. She was in shock, almost unresponsive, and couldn't speak clearly. Fernando assessed the situation and then stated that Julie needs to be dealt with. The tension inside the house intensified when one of the men accidentally said Fernando's real name while inside the vehicle. Julie may have heard it. Fernando feared that if she survived and recognized him by voice, she could become a serious problem. Investigators later confirmed that Aldos fired the first shot at Julie, followed by Efren. The firearm had been brought in advance, part of a plan that had clearly gone much further than intended. While Julie was still being held captive in the house on Leno Street in Quezon City, in the early morning hours, around 5 a.m., Julie's body was placed into a Mitsubishi Montero and driven away from Leno Street. The vehicle made a brief stop at 121 18th Avenue in Quezon City. There, the door opened, and her body was pulled out and left in a roadside ditch. Julie's family was worried when she didn't come home. Julie had never disappeared before and always kept in touch. This time, she hadn't contacted anyone. Her family tried to reach Althea, but she didn't answer. They started searching for her. The next morning, a news report about a young woman's body found in a ditch led Julie's mother, Luz, and her brother to the morgue. The clothes on the body matched what Julie had been wearing. Luz confirmed that the victim was Julie. This was devastating for the family. At this point, the police began investigating the connections between Julie, Althea, and Fernando. The day after Julie's body was found, investigators from the Criminal Investigation and Detection Unit started examining crucial evidence. They began by analyzing a McDonald's receipt clutched in the victim's hand. Using the time printed on the receipt, the police asked for security camera footage from the McDonald's on United Nations Avenue. The video showed a clear image of a man of medium height with noticeable tattoos ordering takeout at around 2 a.m. His face was easily recognizable. Concurrently, authorities were verifying details about a vehicle seen fleeing the scene. Witnesses had reported a black SUV, believed to be a Mitsubishi Montero. 2 individuals even partially recalled the license plate number. From this information, investigators traced the vehicle to a woman named Rosalina. A background check revealed that her son, Fernando Quiambao Jr., regularly used the vehicle, placing him at the center of the investigation. He matched the McDonald's customer's photo at 2 a.m. On the 9th of November, police began watching the Quiambao family's house. They didn't see Fernando the next day, but around 6 p.m., they saw his father, Fernando Quiambao Sr., leave. He was driving a black Toyota Innova and heading northwest. Officers followed him without being noticed. About an hour later, Fernando Sr. stopped in Apalit, a small town in Pampanga province. He went inside a Bahay Kubo, a traditional Filipino house. Fernando's mother's Mitsubishi Montero was parked close by. Police then entered the property and found Fernando and Althea inside. They didn't resist arrest, and no weapons were found. A forensic team investigated the scene, and the suspects were taken to the station for questioning. Around midnight on the 11th of November, police entered the house that had been used to hold Julie. There were armed people inside, and a gunfight broke out. One suspect, Fahad Osman, also known as Bob, was killed. Then, Jaymar Waraji and Jilan Pasawa were arrested, charged with illegally having guns, and brought in for more questioning. At first, all suspects denied being involved in the crime. But as the questioning continued and the pressure mounted, their stories started to change. Jaymar admitted he was at the house where Julie was held and began to help the investigators. He said he agreed to help Fernando because he was loyal to him, explaining that Fernando often gave him and others alcohol and money. Jaymar identified Efren Talib and Aldos as others involved. Jaymar stated that Aldos acted on his own and made the situation worse than anyone anticipated. Althea, interviewed separately, gave her version of the events. She admitted to agreeing to lure Julie to the location, but claimed she had no idea that things would go as far as they did. She stated that she believed it was only meant to scare her. Fernando, for his part, remained silent during questioning and demanded that his arrest be ruled invalid, insisting there was no evidence directly linking him to the crime. The investigation eventually confirmed that 7 individuals were involved: Fernando Quiambao Jr., Althea Altamirano, Jaymar Waraji, Jilan Pasawa, Efren Talib, Aldos, Bob, who was fatally shot. It became clear that the events were not the result of a personal dispute or emotional outburst, but were part of a coordinated and premeditated plan that ended in a tragic loss of life. As details emerged, the case gained wide media attention, and the investigation moved into high gear. After Althea was arrested, she agreed to talk to detectives. However, she immediately became defensive. During questioning, she claimed her boyfriend, Fernando, had manipulated and pressured her. She said Fernando had threatened her in the past, so she felt forced to follow his plan. Althea claimed she went into shock after the abduction and didn't know what to do. This, she said, was why she initially lied to the police and hid what really happened. She insisted she didn't know where Julie was taken or what happened to her. Jaymar Waraji's account differed significantly from Althea. He gave investigators a detailed description of the plan's creation, identifying each person's role and explaining how the operation unfolded. Jaymar stated that Althea informed Fernando of Julie's location and created the cover story used to entice Julie to the meeting. He also claimed Althea knew the SUV, and the people in it were waiting. Investigators believed Althea's actions demonstrated her willing participation in the abduction. After the arrest of several suspects, Aldos and Efren disappeared. Police couldn't catch them, so they were declared fugitives, and a national alert was issued. Jaymar helped the police create images of them to show the public. However, Aldos and Efren remained free, avoiding capture not just in 2012, but for many years after. The case took a surprising turn when one of the detainees, Jilan Pasawa, was released on bail in January 2013. He had been charged with illegally possessing firearms, but investigators lacked solid proof connecting him to the deadly attack or any acts of violence. Shortly after his release, on June 15th, a violent event occurred at his Quezon City home. While his family was eating, an unidentified person entered the property and fatally shot him. Jilan's wife refused to cooperate with the investigation and signed a waiver preventing any further inquiry into the incident. Consequently, the perpetrator was never caught, Gilon's death was a setback for investigators because he could have been a witness in Julie's case. Although he claimed he wasn't involved in Julie's death, his part in planning her abduction remained unclear. Despite this, the case was officially closed because Julie's family declined to press charges. The public strongly criticized this decision, even though the attacker was known. The police couldn't act without the family's complaint due to existing laws. By the summer of 2013, almost everyone connected to the case was either arrested or had an arrest warrant out for them. Althea insisted she wasn't to blame for anything and denied knowing Aldous or Efren. However, witnesses, the order of events, and confirmed details all proved she was lying. By the end of the investigation, the authorities knew exactly who had made the important choices, who had participated in the crime, and who was still on the run. Nearly 12 years passed from the time of Julianne Rodelas's tragic death to the first sentencing in the case. For a long time, the investigation remained stalled. It wasn't until 2024 that a trial was finally scheduled for Fernando Quayambao Jr. and Althea Altamirano. The initial court date, set for the 12th of July, was rescheduled 3 times. Although the reasons for the delays weren't officially disclosed, the victim's family believed the repeated postponements only served the interests of the accused. The trial began in September and lasted several months. Court sessions examined witness statements, case files, surveillance footage, and text communications between the involved parties. Notably, the firearm used in the fatal incident was never recovered. 2 of the suspected perpetrators, Efren Talib and Aldous, remained fugitives. After the trial, the court found Fernando Quayambao Jr. guilty of kidnapping, being an accessory to a violent crime, and engaging in aggressive behavior. Fernando received a life sentence with a minimum of 22 to 40 years. He must also pay the victim's family 500,000 Philippine pesos as compensation. Althea Altamirano was found guilty of conspiracy to commit kidnapping. The court determined that there wasn't enough evidence to prove she knew beforehand that the kidnapping would involve fatal harm or aggression. Prosecutors couldn't directly prove she was at the crime scene after the kidnapping or that she had contact with Aldous or Efren. Therefore, she was only convicted of conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Althea had already been detained for more than 12 years. The court decided that this time served satisfied her sentence and ordered her immediate release. She was also fined 100,000 pesos. This decision provoked a strong emotional reaction from the Rodelas family. Luz, Julie's mother, along with several of her siblings, attended the sentencing hearing. Alvin, one of the brothers, publicly stated that forgiveness was impossible. The family appealed to the Supreme Court, requesting a re-evaluation of Althea's actions. In their view, her role in the events was not secondary, but pivotal. She initiated the conflict, involved Fernando, and had a personal motive driving him. Aside from the legal aspects, the case brought up difficult ethical issues. The prosecution proposed 2 possibilities: professional jealousy and personal resentment, fueled by a desire for revenge. The first idea was that in the cutthroat world of modeling, leaking personal information could seriously harm someone's career, where image is everything. The second idea was that Julie's greater success, landing more important jobs and becoming more popular, upset their relationship. Althea lost control and began to see Julie as a competitor instead of a friend. This change and the resulting loss of status may have been very humiliating for Althea. The key unresolved issue is whether Althea should have anticipated the outcome. Legally, the answer was no, but the facts suggest otherwise. Althea was aware of the nature of the people involved and Fernando's history of aggression. She initiated the chain of events and then relinquished control to individuals known to use violence. The court's failure to acknowledge Althea's role in these events left the Rodelas family feeling that justice had not been served. 2 key individuals involved in carrying out the crime remain at large. The Rodelas family continues to push for a full review of the case. Julie's mother declared that she would keep fighting for justice and called Althea's release an insult to her daughter's memory.